Good morning and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio MFL events. I'm Hannah Purdy and I am one of the coordinators for Teachers Talk Radio MFL. And I'm joined by the team this morning, Adam Lamb, who is our co-coordinator, Esmeralda Salgado, and Sophie Mills, who are our team members. And a massive welcome to Sophie, who is new on the team for this event and also will be presenting this morning. We're really excited that you're joining us this morning for a bit of CPD. We've got a whole host of presentations which are going to be fantastic. I've really enjoyed looking through all of the presentations in preparation for today's events, and we've got a great variety of topics and themes and some fantastic ideas that you'll be able to take away today and use in your classroom immediately. To start us off this morning, we've got Phil Hawkes, who's going to be talking to us about promoting engagement in the MFL classroom. Phil is an MFL teacher. He teaches French and Italian and has also formerly been a head of department. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm good.
Good. I'm just going to add your slides to the stage and I'm going to hand over to you for your presentation on promoting engagement.
Thank you.
Okay, is that all right? Over to you, Phil.
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here this morning. I'm just going to start off today by just giving my own sort of personal perspective on MFL teaching, what I think a great MFL lesson might look like. A bit of a sort of health warning. I'm not saying that all of my lessons look like this. I know that teaching, having done it for 5 years or so, I know that teaching is full of unpredictables and we're dealing with teenagers and that, you know, it doesn't always go to plan. But I want to kind of show you, give you a flavour of what I think like the ideal lesson looks like in order to promote engagement in the MFL classroom. I'm not a huge believer myself on, you know, looking really deeply into teaching theory books and looking at teaching theory. And I don't think that's the best way of finding out how to teach. Having said that, I just want to share a couple of quotes from when I did my PGCE year in 2019, I think it was. And it's just a couple of quotes that have really stuck with me throughout my teaching career. The first one at the top left is from Doug Lamov. He's not talking about MFL teaching per se, but I think this really does apply to an MFL lesson. What he's saying essentially is that you don't want to switch from topic to topic within a lesson because that's confusing. You want to stick on the same topic and have the same goal by the end of the lesson, but you want to change up subtly how you're delivering that. So, for example, if I'm teaching how to talk about holidays in French, I want, by the end of the lesson, my students to be able to say that they want to go on holiday, who they want to go on holiday with and why, and to give a reason. That's my goal by the end of the lesson. I'm going to do different topics and different activities in pursuit of that. But I think if you've got a really clear idea at the end of the lesson about what you want your students to be able to do, produce, what you want them to write or say out loud, then it makes it a lot easier. So that's just something that's really stuck with me throughout my teaching career. And then the bottom one on the right is from Steve Smith. It's all about pace. I think personally, MFL is a really difficult subject to teach. Also, teaching is a challenging job, whatever the subject. But I think MFL is unique. It's quite challenging for a lot of students. I think there can sometimes be the apathy element. What's the point of learning languages? So I think it is a real challenge. So I think keeping the pace really high in lessons is a really good way of being able to engage students. It avoids boredom. It allows them to, it keeps them on their toes. So I hope what I'm going to show you in a second kind of reinforces the importance of that. So those are two things that have always stuck with me throughout my teaching career. Why have I got a picture of building blocks on the screen? It's just the classic scaffolding, the idea of scaffolding. You've got to be able to build up knowledge over time, over a lesson and over a sequence of lessons. You've got to do it gradually. I remember when I was starting out in teaching, I would do a listening task on one thing, and then I'd suddenly veer into the past tense, and then I'd veer into something else, and it'd be really confusing. So all the blocks would tumble down, okay, and the students wouldn't know what's going on. And then that's where you have behaviour problems. It's got to be, I think it's got to be a gradual process, and you've got to drill the same stuff over and over again. I think that's where Conti comes in, doesn't it, with the EPI theory. You drill the same language again and again, and then you build it up, and then you make it more complicated, and you add extensions. None of this is new. This isn't me coming up with something miraculous and different. But I think it's something that's really important for learning languages. So what I want to share with you for promoting engagement in the MFL lesson, I want to share with you just a few little things, and then I'm going to go through how I sequence my lessons in order to get the most out of the students. There's a few little ideas here. Maybe one or two of them might stick out. Again, this is nothing new. I'm not coming up with anything new, but I think these are the top things that help with MFL engagement in the classroom. Lots of speaking practice. I think mini whiteboards, I've put that in stars there. I think having mini whiteboards is crucial. I'm not a huge fan personally of having loads of writing in a book, in a lesson. I don't really see the value of getting students to write down all their answers for listening tasks, for example. I would rather have mini whiteboard practice so that they can correct themselves. Lots of target language, obviously, in the classroom. As I've said, lots of fast pace, lots of praise and encouragement, practicing in pairs. I don't personally think the MFL classroom needs to be a silent one. I don't think a good MFL lesson is a silent one. I think you want to have lots of engagement, lots of talking. How about trying, for example, having at the end of each activity, having students practice for 30 seconds in pairs to talking about whatever the question of the lesson is. I'll show you how I would do that in a second. And then games. I'm a big fan of games in the lesson. There's a few classic ones on there that have been around for years: delayed dictation, faulty pronunciation, missing words, telepathy, mind reader, etc. So I'm going to go through a couple of those with you, and a couple of other games that I like to use. I like to personally have a treasure box at the start of my classroom. I got this idea from a lady called Marie Massey, who was the head of MFL at the Danes Educational Trust. She had a treasure box at the front of her classroom, and that's something I do as well now. I think that's just a nice little way of motivating students. I wouldn't get it out every lesson, but if I get out the treasure box, the students know that the stakes are high, and that really helps with encouragement. Okay. My lesson sequence structure. This is how I do it, personally. As I said at the start, it doesn't always work like this. Thursday, last lesson with my year 9s, they might be too lively, and I might not be able to do it like this. I might have to go straight into a reading task instead in order to settle them down. But this is the ideal. This is what I'm aiming for. So my starter activity, I would refer back to a previous topic, whatever we did before. I would then introduce my core vocab. I'll show you how I'll do that in a second. And then I'll do lots of drilling with whiteboards to really practice the key vocab that I want the students to be able to learn at the end of the lesson. I'll do a bit more drilling in books. I'll show you how I'll do that in a second. And then, as I said at the start, I think a great MFL lesson has a production task at the end. So a small writing task or a small speaking task supported by a sentence builder, just so you can show at the end of the lesson that the students are able to produce something that they couldn't at the start, because I think that's how you engage MFL pupils. If you're able to show them, wow, you can say this in French now, you can say this in Italian now, you can say this in Spanish now. That's something tangible that they've got, and it really motivates them. I'm going to show you a quick example how I've used this sequence structure in real life. So this is lesson 1 of the sequence. I try and break my sequence structures into three lessons at a time. Lesson 1. This is holidays. This is year 8s. I'm referring back to using the present tense that we did in the previous topic. So this is the starter activity, just to get them settled. This is probably a little bit more complicated than I would normally do, but I think the lesson before this we did a little bit of past tense as well. So quick starter activity. Okay, as I said at the start, have a goal at the end of the lesson, something that you want them to be able to achieve. I don't get them to copy down the objective or anything like that, but I just quickly, almost to remind myself, this is what I want them to be able to do at the end of the lesson. Have a conversation about where you want to go. So that's the aim of the lesson. So we know what we're aiming for. Okay, so I'm introducing my key vocab now. So we'll do a bit of repetition, maybe a bit of beat the teacher. So If I'm pointing at le centre-ville, they would repeat it after me. If I'm pointing at les magasins, repeat it after me. If I'm pointing at les magasins, but I'm saying le cinéma, they have to stay silent. So classic beat the teacher game. Again, that's been around for years. That's nothing new, but that's, I think, a good way of introducing new vocab. And then you can maybe make a little competition, have 2 students come up to the board and get them to point at the correct one. Which one is ice skating rink? First person to point it gets a point on the board. I like to personally, I don't know if this is for everyone. I like to do points on the board throughout the whole lesson. So make the whole lesson a bit of a competition. So if someone wins this particular task, so I have 2 students come to the front and someone comes first and pointing at the right one, they get a point. In a later activity, if someone comes first in delayed dictation, they get a point. And then I like to have, by the end of the lesson, okay, 3 students who've got the most points on the board, come and get a sticker. It won't just be for winning a game, it will be for good engagement, etc. So points on the board, that's a little tip. Then here comes the sentence builder. I would like to print this off and have them glue it in their books, but then I'd put it on the board. And this is where we do our whiteboard practice. So this is going to be with us all lesson, basically, our sentence builder. So we would do our classic games now, our delayed dictation, or maybe our faulty pronunciation. So write down on your whiteboard the word that I pronounce wrong. Je veux aller au cinéma. Oh, I've said that word wrong. So you've got to write it down on your whiteboard. First person to write down cinéma with the accent gets the point. Okay, so quick pace. Move it quickly. As I said at the start, this doesn't always work. Behavior might not be up to scratch. You might not be able to go straight into whiteboard games at the start of the lesson. I know definitely sometimes in my teaching, it's not feasible to go straight into whiteboards, but this is the ideal, I think. So delayed dictation, delayed copying, faulty pronunciation, maybe missing words. That's a classic game. So which word do I miss out? Write it down. Je veux aller au cinéma. Mes amis. I've missed out avec. Write it down. Okay. So after a little bit of that, I would then want to have a bit of speaking practice throughout the classroom. So they've got the question in front of them. They've got the sentence builder, in front of them. So how about after each task, having them talk in pairs and just practice speaking out loud? Tu veux aller au cinéma? You would say in pairs, one of the students, and the other would reply, oui, je veux aller au cinéma, and then carry it on using their sentence builder. So it's very reliant on the sentence builder, this part of the lesson. They're just practicing speaking out loud. Little tip at the bottom, why not have a detective going around the classroom to check everyone is speaking in the target language? Sometimes I like to, those weird glasses, I can't remember if there's a name for them, but like multicolored glasses. I'd get them to put on those, and then I'd have that student walking around the classroom, pretending to be a detective to check everyone is speaking in the target language. So just do that for 30, 45 seconds, just to get them speaking out loud. Right, I'm going to share now a couple of other games that I would do for this drilling part of the lesson. This is delayed dictation with a duck. Delayed dictation's been around for years, but I think I've introduced this one as a new activity. So it's the same, but you have a duck involved. So I say something in the target language, and they've got to write it on their whiteboard in the target language, but they can only write it down when the duck reaches the pond. So it's delayed dictation, but using a duck. So for example, I would say, je veux aller au cinéma avec mes amis. Okay, you've got to remember that. And you can only write it on your whiteboard when the duck reaches the pond. And it's going to take a while. So during this time, it's silent in the classroom. And the students are trying to remember that phrase. They're locking that phrase into the head, so they're remembering it. So it's the classic delayed dictation theory, but it's just a little fun way of doing it. Now, that duck hasn't actually reached the pond, but I would say, that's fine. Okay, start writing it down. Okay, and then we would do it again with another duck and another one. I have some that will go on for a good minute or so. I'm not going to show that right now, but it's a fun way of drilling, I think, the key vocab. I've got a lot of examples of the ducks. Chain reaction, not my game. This has been around for a while, but it's a fun game, I think. So those that don't know what this one is, Team A, one side of the room, Team B, one side of the room. I would time it on a timer. And I would say, okay, Bob, how do you say I want? Okay, Chris, how do I say to go? And then you go around one by one, and they've got to translate each flashcard if you call their name, and then you time how long it takes them to say that. If it was the first lesson of the sequence, I would let them use their sentence builder to help them. But it's just a fun way of practicing, of drilling. I think this is a Mr. Hawk special, but maybe someone else has come up with this before. I would have a toy chinchilla, not a real one, that I'd throw around the classroom, and they've got to throw it back to me, and we see how many times we can do that by the time the 2 yellow bars reach the middle of the screen. Actually, I'm sure this is done by other people as well, but I'd like to think the picture of the chinchilla is original. So as you can see, you've got 2 yellow bars. You can create this easily by using PowerPoint animations. We're waiting for them to reach the middle. During this time, I'm throwing the chinchilla around the classroom, and it's coming back to me. And each time a student's got the chinchilla, I'm asking them a simple question based on our language for the lesson. Tu veux aller au cinéma? Qu'est-ce que tu veux faire? What do you want to do? And they give a quick answer. And then another student's at the board giving a points for each time a good answer comes back to me. And we're seeing how many answers I can get within that minute by the time the 2 yellow bars meet in the middle. So that's a fun little way of practicing.
Phil, sorry to interrupt. You've got 2 minutes left.
2 minutes left, no worries. Another one here. This is from an Italian lesson, so I'm sidestepping slightly. So we would all read the text together, and they have to stop immediately as soon as Mr. Blobby hits the screen. So they're reading it together as a class, and then they have to stop when Mr. Blobby appears. And that's a fun little game as well. We can make it competitive by then having it slightly harder to spot Mr. Blobby. So that's a good way of drilling the key vocab as well. But I mean, this is from a different, this is from GCSE Italian, I think. And we could do it with the Honey Monster as well. A classic 21 game, try and reach 21, but using words instead of numbers. So another way of drilling the vocab. I would want to do some drilling in books as well. So this is a classic listening dictation. So this is a good little activity to do as well, just to calm things down. We don't want everything to be on whiteboards. We don't want everything to be a game. So nice little classic listening dictation on the vocab that we're practicing. Okay, just to finish then. By the end of the lesson, I would want to have them writing or speaking with a bit more depth, maybe with less sentence builder, using our sentence builder. And then we reach lessons 2 and 3 of the sequence. And at that point, we're going into a little more depth. So I don't want to just do drilling. I don't want to just do EPI. I want to also do the extension activities as well. So in lesson 2 and 3, we'll do exactly the same as we've done before, as I've just shown you. But then we would have, for extension purposes, a bit of narrow reading, that classic sort of EPI Conti idea of, really looking into that vocab, but in a different context. Okay, so a bit of a reading task, just for those sort of the students that want to get more in depth into the language. Would have our grammar points, of course. That doesn't go away with this lesson sequence. So we'd look at that at lesson 2 point, maybe in lesson 3 point. And then we'd have our translations. So we're still doing all those drilling activities I showed, but we're just making it harder. So here we're doing translations with that extra grammar point, the third person present tense. And then at the end of the lesson sequence, hopefully we'll be able to do a longer writing task. I would tell them to cover up their sentence builder in the book, put a pencil case over their sentence builder so they can't see it, and see what they can remember. Okay, this would not be on the screen. I would want them to write from memory now. But you've got that extension element as well. Can you remember how to use these different tenses from previous lessons as well? So it's drilling, but at the end, you've got your extension element. I hope that I had some interesting ideas. Maybe 1 or 2 of them you might want to try in lessons. As I said, doesn't always go to plan like this, but this is personally how I think you can promote engagement in the MFL classroom. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Phil. That's fantastic. I've written loads of notes and loads of ideas that have inspired me for planning this weekend for the coming week as well. We've had a couple of questions. I think you answered it later on in your presentation in terms of your delayed dictation about how long you allow for that thinking time. On average, I know you said you increase it to possibly even a minute. How long do you normally allow it, or does it
average? I would say probably 30 seconds. But if I'm in a particular mood, I might put over a minute just for the fun of it, just because it's funny.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for such fantastic ideas this morning. We really appreciate you giving up your time to come and join us this morning. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
I've just noticed a couple of questions in the chat. Please keep the questions coming through either on X or on any other social media that we're using this morning. If you are tweeting along on X, our hashtag is TTRMFL. A couple of questions coming through on the comments at the moment on the live stream about recordings and resources. So what we do with all of our events, you've signed up for the event, so therefore we have your contact details, and the recording will be posted on the same link as you've joined today. So you'll have a recording of all the presentations from today's event there. What I'll also do following the event today, I'll be emailing all of our presenters to ask them if they are happy for me to share their slides as a PDF on test resources, and we will post those. And if we receive consent from presenters may also choose to share their slides if they so wish on their own socials as well, but we'll put those all on test for the ones that are happy to share slides. So hopefully that answers a couple of questions. Loads of comments there coming through, Phil, to say thank you for some fantastic ideas and some really good ideas there, so thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Esmeralda now, who's going to introduce our next presenter.
Hello, everybody. Okay, it's lovely to be here. I am very honored to present Vincent Everett, who it is, I think, stuck with us many times before, and I think he's a legend in the MFL world. So up to you, Vincent. Vincent is head of department for MFL in his school, and he's super experienced. He's been teaching, I think, for about 20 years, Vincent. And nearly there, you've been teaching, always been there in the run front for MFL, and I can't wait to hear everything about his presentation. Off to you, Vincent.
Right. I don't know if my screen's been shared quite yet. I can say I've been teaching probably more like 30 years in this country. There we go. Right, let's get started. Okay, well, I'm going to talk about, thanks Esmeralda for introducing me. It's amazing to be introduced by an actual legend as well, so that's brilliant. Developing extended spontaneous answers. I'm going to talk about speaking and writing and speaking. It's all part of the same thing. So if you ask a pupil to write some French, they might do that. They might write J'habite dans le Norfolk, and then they think, right, yeah, very good. I like that. Well done, me. And then, what else can I put? Il y a un magasin, which is fine. French is fine. It's true. Not sure it's continued from the first one. I'm sure there's more than one shop in Norfolk, but with this asking them to write in a foreign language. So, yeah. What else did I put? J'aime mon chien. Good. Well done, me. And he asked them to write a little bit more. They always put Je m'appelle Zach. That's not really what I'm after with spontaneous developed answers. So there's no coherence. He's got no vision. He's got no plan. He hasn't got any way of linking one idea to the next and developing it that way. What we really want is something more like this. So this person saying they like to go shopping with their friends. They can go to Norwich. They like to go to Ed's Diner. Their mum doesn't, something or other, mum thinks it's too expensive when they go shopping. Then the little adventure they went on, and they had to go with their parents because their dad had the money. They did all their shopping, and then they went to Ed's Diner and it was permanently closed, which is a true story, he told me. And he just wrote this on a blank piece of paper. We did it as a speaking as well. That's where we want to be. I don't know if you know the delightful children's story, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. I'll stop it doing that. If you give a mouse a cookie, he's probably going to ask for a glass of milk. If you give a mouse a glass of milk, he's probably going to want to check in the mirror to see if he's got a milk moustache. If you let a mouse look in the mirror, so we want something that rolls and you turn the page, and if this happens, then that happens. If this happens, then that happens. And it goes on and on and on and on. A bit like this. There we go. Stop that. So if you start with an opinion, j'aime aller au parc, you're probably going to justify it. In fact, there isn't a pupil that I teach who won't, their next word won't be parce que. J'aime aller au parc parce que. And my students won't say because it is interesting. They'll go because I can. J'aime aller au parc parce que je peux jouer au tennis avec mes amis. I like to go to the park because I can play tennis with my friends, and it automatically happens. As soon as you've said that word j'aime, you choose your thing, park, swimming pool, beach, television, whatever you're talking about, but it will not stop there. If you start with an opinion, you're going to justify it. Once you've justified your opinion, you're probably going to explore the circumstances, especially if it's nice weather. Mr. Everett loves an if sentence. If you do one if sentence, if it's nice, you're going to explore the opposite. But if it rains, so at this point, every single student I teach would know their next word would be but if. I like to go to the park because, of course, I can play tennis with my friends, especially if it's nice. But if it rains, I have to stay at home. Oh, we missed one. If you mention someone else, avec mes amis, that's when you use those conjugated verbs. We teach the present tense, but do pupils have a trigger for using it? Do they know when to deploy it? Make it a rule. If you say my brother, he does something, or we, if you do it together. If you say my sister, she does this, I do that, or we. Okay. I like to go to the park because I can play tennis with my friends. We play every Saturday. Make it a rule. That's what happens. If you've been giving your opinion, I like to play tennis because I go to the park and play with my friends. We play every Saturday, especially if it's nice, but if it rains, I have to stay at home. Maybe give someone else's opinion. On the other hand, my sister prefers to go into town. Now what you've done is you've set up a difference of opinion. So if you've set up a difference of opinion, you're going to have some kind of conflict. You can have a little vignette, what's the word, a little narrative. I mean, the current GCSE has the word narrate in the criteria for the speaking exam. So an example, and this word par exemple is magic for my students. We use it as a trigger for past tense. I don't have to say, could you please give me an example in the past tense of what we have just been talking about? I just literally in the exam will say par exemple, and they will go par exemple, le weekend, j'allais faire mes devoirs. At the weekend, I was going to do my homework. And if you've said what you were going to do, you probably say why you changed your mind. If, I was going to, next word, but. Mais il faisait beau, but it was nice. Next word, I was going to do my homework, but it was nice. So, every kid in the class will go, so, my sister said, I'm going to town. If you use direct speech, you'll probably have a reply. I said, well, yeah, I've got to do my homework. My sister said, you can do that tomorrow. See where it's going already? And all that was unlocked from saying j'aime. If you've said I like, you're going to say because. Then you'll do an if. If you've done an if, you'll do the other if. If you say who with, you'll do your conjugated verb. If you've done your opinion, you'll do someone else's opinion. Then you'll have an example. You'll start with what was going to happen. Then you'll give a reason for your decision and what happened. If you've said I was going to, which we did earlier, it's going to be followed by I decided to. I decided to go into town with my sister. Now, in that, where it says j'allais, I was going to, they might learn that as a little trick, as a cheat to do the past tenses, as a little tactic. But also in there is the ending for was-ing. So I was swimming, I was talking, I was playing. They can very quickly pick that up from having just learned j'allais. And if you look at I decided to, j'ai décidé, it's the form of the past tense. Once they've learned j'ai décidé as their trick, as their cheat for doing the past tense, they can then use it for j'ai joué, j'ai mangé, j'ai nagé. It's right there. If you went along with what your sister wanted to do, you're probably going to have a disagreement. I wanted to buy some shoes, but unfortunately, my sister just wanted to see her friends. If you don't think your pupils will cope with I wanted, you could just stick to this. I said I want to buy some shoes. My sister said, no, 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 I want to see my friends. If you have a disagreement, you'll probably have a disappointment. I would have liked to go to the shops. Me hubiera gustado ir a las tiendas. And we're not throwing these fancy phrases in just to be fancy. It is the logical culmination of this whole conflict of opinions. If you have a disappointment, maybe there's hope for next time. Demain, je voudrais retourner en ville. But tomorrow, I can go back into town. I'd like to go back into town, but I have to do my homework. which links right back to what we have said before. So if we're looking for coherence, we've got it. It's unrolled. What we haven't got is a whole list of shopping, go on the bus, go swimming, play tennis. We've stuck to one idea and we've developed it. There it is. There's the whole thing. And that all unrolled from J'aime. I like because we play if, what was happening, why you changed your mind, what you decided, what you wanted to do, what you would have preferred to have done, and then the future. And that's how you get this sort of thing. I love to go to Norwich on the bus with my friends at the weekend because we can eat at McDonald's. If I go with my family, my mum doesn't like to eat fast food, so we have to buy a sandwich in Marks and Spencer's. So it's not always that formulaic. Pupils will always want to use it to express their own stories. I was going to order a salad, but when I saw the hamburgers on the screen, I decided to ask for 2. I ate too much. I would have preferred to have a healthy sandwich. This is not about the language. It's not about the French, the Spanish, the German. We teach, I like, I can, I have to, I want, she prefers, it is sunny. I was going to, if you don't, you can. Kids love iba in Spanish. It was sunny, I said, she said, I decided, wanted, went, decided. We teach these things. It's about getting good at deploying the language. Very quickly, this you can see is my classroom. On the desk here in the foreground, you can see this pupil has got written on there, because I can, because I can't, because I have to, because I don't have to. And every pupil around the class will have this, and we'll go around the classroom. So the first pupil, you can't see off to the left of the screen there, would have I like, I don't like. So on the whiteboard at the front of the classroom, go to the aquarium. So the first one, I like to go to the aquarium. Second pupil, reading what they've got on their desk, while repeating, I like to go to the aquarium because I can see the fish. Move on to the pupil behind. I like to go to the aquarium because I can see the fish, especially if it's rainy. Next pupil, I like to go to the aquarium, and they go through the whole story. Then you just change the infinitives on the board. You go around the class to build it up as a story, end up with that. Or have it as a game plan. Here we have it as the defensive half. All day pupils can do I like, because, but, if, 1, 2 with the if this, but if that. Then the attacking half is where you've got what was happening, what you decided to do, speech. 1, 2 again, play the 1, 2 with he said, she said. Okay, so we've come quite a long way from our friend Zach and his dog. So yeah, that's me. I think I've brought it in on under 15 minutes. Plenty more on the blog if you want to have a look at that. Yes, have we got any questions?
Thank you very much, Vincent. I mean, the comments were fantastic. You got comments like, "This is genius. This is great," and I use a very similar approach. Actually, I love the scaffolding. How you can be doing in there. There's a question here as well. Is that what would you do with weaker groups? Would you have like a simpler version for weaker groups, or do you expect everybody to do this regardless of the ability?
I have pupils in year 11 who think porque puedo is a thing. They, after you've said me gusta, they always do porque puedo. I've got pupils who think, well, and they know if you use I would like, they know to use if I were to have the opportunity. And the weakest pupils in the class can immediately do that. And I don't set out to teach these fancy phrases. It is part of the thing. But yeah, I mean, it's the bare bones of it. The language is not the thing. Everyone knows I like. Everyone can say because I can. Yes, it builds up. So in year 8, year 8 French, we're just getting to adding in the past tense. Yeah, but the thing, it's not about the language. It's really not. It's about, because we always teach I like and I don't like and I can and I can't. What we need to teach is how it,
that they learn, and they don't need to know that they're using the perfect tense or anything like that. They just use it and they communicate. And it can be taught all the way from year 7, because they can learn, my friend says that, I am told, but my friend says that I'm short. That's it. And you use reported speech. It's what I call one of the magic powers. So I agree with you. I think that is very, very, very good. I mean, the comments have been really, really good. So that is absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Vincent.
Thank you.
I love your presentations. They're always down to the point. And I think we are going to have Sophie introducing our next guest.
Thanks, Esmeralda. Morning, everybody. Lovely to see you all. And thank you for all the comments. Do keep them coming. Next up, we've got Liam Brettag, Mr. Brettag MFL over on X. Liam is a head of MFL. He teaches German, French and Spanish in Key Stage 3, 4 and 5, so he is a busy man. He's passionate about teaching and learning and about CPD, as we all seemingly are here on a sunny Saturday morning. He's going to talk to us about success in writing at GCSE. So Liam, it is over to you when you are ready.
Thank you very much. Guten Morgen. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to have been asked. I wanted to talk to you all about GCSE writing, particularly sort of Key Stage 4, because I think that's where there's a lot of discussion at the minute to do with obviously the new GCSE. And it's just sort of thinking about key strategies. And like we've said before, you know, there's nothing going to be essentially maybe groundbreaking here, but it's just stuff that I do in my classroom that works, that I would hope, you know, I could share with others that would work for you as well. So I think the first thing obviously to talk about is obviously thinking about when you get a new cohort, when you get your new year 10 or year 9, if you do a 3-year GCSE, when you get that new class, how are you going to start successfully with them? Because you want to start as you mean to go on, and you want a lot of the time to really engage those students who aren't perhaps the most enthusiastic about language learning. And there's always going to be those in there who you've got because they absolutely love German, Spanish, French, or you've got the ones also who they've been perhaps chosen that as one of their last options, or maybe one of their parents have sort of cajoled them into doing it because, you know, they're trying to share how useful it is. So I think it's really important to try and capture everybody's interest, regardless of where they are on the scale of their enthusiasm for that subject. Something that I've done this year with my team is that we've worked really hard on mapping out the learning journey for them. And every single time we have, all of our lessons are on the same PowerPoint template, so we can see it's an MFL lesson when anybody walks into our lessons. But after the title slide, the retrieval practice, the next thing that we look at is the learning journey. So it shows what they've done last lesson, or last half term rather, what they're doing this half term, and then what they're going to be doing next half term. And that really sort of allows the students who are less engaged to say at the start of GCSE, well, okay, we're doing, you know, school at the minute. You might not be interested in school, but you'll be interested in music, won't you? In different types of music that you can be talking about. Or we're doing a little bit on festivals later on in the year. You'll be enthusiastic about doing that. So it's about giving them the options and showing them that it's not all immediately like, just because you don't start on a topic that you're interested in, it's not necessarily going to be like that all the way through. I think one of the things that we do as well that's really effective is showing them how they're assessed. If they understand what it looks like from our perspective when we're writing, when they're writing for us, when we're using the mark scheme, if they can see that, and we always get them to print it off at the start of the year, and they highlight that and change the phrasing perhaps to a bit more student-friendly language, that's always been very successful in allowing them to get on board a little bit sooner, I think. Giving them examples of work is something, again, that we've trialed, and it's had varying levels of success, but this year it's worked quite well, I think. And it's not necessarily students who are in year 11. It might be students from a few years ago where they've produced some work and they've said that they're happy to share it, and we get that in their books with them, and we sort of show where they've got the marks, and we allow those students to highlight and annotate all of that work as well. I think making it relatable is really important, especially for those ones who, you know, we'll all have those students in our classes who say, when am I ever going to go to Germany? When am I ever going to go to France or wherever, and things like that. It's not as, it's become less, I think, over the last couple of years. I've been teaching for 6 years now, and it's definitely got less. And it depends on where you work, I think, as well. My previous school was in a very different sort of demographic area, and like, attitudes were slightly different to languages where that was. But I think now people are a little bit more open to it. But I think if you can make it relatable by using, for example, Instagram templates, or using, you know, for the writing task, I think if you could use, and it's as simple as screenshotting perhaps your own Instagram and just changing obviously the picture and like getting rid of your username and things like that, but showing them this is something that they can recognize. This is something that, you know, is relatable to them, which is going to draw them in a little bit more, I think. Doing live models in class as well, because sometimes textbooks can be a little bit dry, and it's you need to reinvent the wheel a little bit sometimes when you are going through things. So doing it either through, you know, a visualizer or going through on the board, I think is really, really good. Our reprographics team are absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure there's a lot of amazing reprographics teams in all of your schools as well. We get them to produce at the start of the year like a little A5 booklet with all the vocab they'll be using for GCSE, and they stick that in the back of their books, and it allows them to sort of fast forward a little bit as well and to get interested in the topics, what they're doing later on in the year. So they can draw on the vocab from that, and they can always use it when they're doing an extended piece of writing if it's like an open book one, and it's all just there ready for them. So I think that's something definitely worthwhile doing as well. It's you know, a lot of money to spend like just on printing, but I do genuinely think it's really worth it. What do teachers do then? Obviously, so we talked about the start of the year and how we get them really well prepared. Considering tiers early, I think sometimes it's been a little bit of a controversial topic when talking about tiering students as early as Christmas in year 10, and that's not necessarily to say to them this is the tier you'll be doing, and it's important to obviously consult with parents about that as well, and just having the discussions about you know, getting them into the mode of this is the style task that you'll be doing if you were to do foundation GCSE, this is the style you'll be doing if you were doing higher, and getting them into that. I think they take it a little bit more seriously once they've been tiered. And then you could say to them, obviously, we're going to try you on foundation because I think that's where you're working now. But that's not to say that's set in stone at all. Well, by the time we get to, if they do an end of unit assessment, say just before Christmas in year 10 to see how they're getting on, come back in January and sort of discuss with the team about where everybody thinks they're up to, give them their first tiered assessment, and then by the time we get to Easter, we might be reviewing it again and sort of seeing, are they going through something, are they going into a different tier? Isolated skills lessons, another controversial one. I think some people often say, well, it's better to embed it within lessons, but we do that anyway, and we talk about writing skills, for example, in every single topic that we do. But I think to have a standalone lesson where we introduce the 90-word task, 150-word task, you plan it together, and then you write about it, and then obviously you sort of talking them through it, which is what it says on the next bullet point. So relentless focus on that strategy, talking about it. What am I thinking at this point? What am I doing now? And getting the students to sort of think for themselves at this point, I think is really beneficial. Homework tasks that we've got. This is a big push that we've had in my department this year about making sure homeworks are differentiated and they're appropriate to each of the needs of the task. So you're setting them either the 90 or the 150 word as you go through, and they are slowly disappearing from lessons. So we'll be doing less and less focus on guided writing in lessons, because we've got the culture now where students just do that. They just recognize that's something that they need to do. And every single score that we've set for them as homework, I know, for example, for me, there are 12 90-word tasks that my year 10 cohort so far will have done for me. And I've got a score for each one of them out of 16. So I will know how they've got on. And that helps us to sort of build in all of the revision that we need to do. My final bullet point there is to just stop wittering, because I find it really difficult myself. And it's out of a good place, obviously, as all of us would. When you start them off in the task, you're like, oh, you could just add this in. This is what I'd be saying here. But I've got to remind myself to just stop doing that and to allow them to just do it themselves, because that's part of the resilience and the independent practice, really. I'm just obviously noticing time I've been twittering myself, so I'm not following my own advice here. I'm going to try and go through this as quick as I can to get through everything. So the use of data is really, really important, as any head of department would tell you. I always get my team to add in comments regularly before we have our specific meetings, about like progress meetings. But I've put avoid wishy-washy statements, and that just means that can't do the past tense, for example, is not sufficient. We need to know has struggled with the third bullet point on this topic, and I have done this to help them. So we have regular check-ins as well across the team, and we sort of say it's a focus of every single faculty meeting, but we do have our own standalone RAG meeting, so red, amber, green, where students are assigned a level of intervention and things like that. There's additional live marking is one of the things that we do. We have after school intervention, writing paper clinics after, when we do a big assessment. Students will come at break time or lunchtime, and they'll talk with their teacher and get that small group tuition. And sixth form role models. If you're lucky enough to have Key Stage 5 at your school, we have we've got it, and we sort of always ask Key Stage 5 to say, would you like to come and support with our Year 10s and Year 11s? And they're always happy to, because obviously that looks good for their experience as well. Am I doing all right for time? Have I got 2 minutes?
Don't worry, Tay, you've got time. Don't worry, don't rush.
Well, yeah, thank you. So collaborative approach to learning, I think, is crucial. And obviously we were talking about this before. I know Phil was talking about, for example, using whiteboards. That's something that is central to our focus in MFL. We've got what we call learning boxes on the tables. So every single table, we're in groups of 4, and we always have 4 whiteboards, 4 pens, 4 rubbers, and it's just part of our lesson routines. Students are seated sort of strategically according to high, medium, and low ability. So whether you choose to have them nucleated all together, so you know that is your priority table, or whether you choose to space them out so that we've got mentors or like coaches on each table, that's something to consider as well. And then I've underlined the with purpose bit on teacher circulating, because it's easy, I think, to just get up and wander around. But if you've not got your pen, if you're not sort of supporting them and adding in that additional information, is it really worthwhile? You might as well be doing something and challenging that misconception straight away. To what extent is live modeling successful? Generally, we think it is very successful, but it's about really tightening the screw and making sure that you're doing absolutely everything that you can to make it successful in terms of student engagement, student challenge, and all of that. So there's a few different ways of doing it. Obviously, visualizers are absolutely amazing, and I really enjoy using mine. You've also got the old but gold methods, where you've got things like you are writing it on the board rather than using the visualizer, and they are copying it straight down into their books, which I think there's merit for both of them, to be honest. Student-led ones are where I would choose one of the strongest students in the class to tell me what they're thinking at this point, because we all know students learn better from hearing from themselves, because it's in that student-friendly language that they'll be able to describe stuff to each other. Making deliberate mistakes. So if I said, for example, in German, ich habe gefahren, why is that wrong? Or we can't use haben if there's movement in the perfect tense. It's got to be sein, and try and make it as, you know, as specific and as talking like a linguist as possible. Model the strategy. What am I thinking now? I've just told you that I don't like to do sport because I'm not very sporty. What would I be doing now? I might say, however, I do like to eat lots of fruit and veg, or something like that. Something sort of, that's a bit of an oversimplified example, but you know what I'm saying. Retrieval practice. So obviously we've got a set of transferable language as well. There's 15 key phrases that we use, and that there's past, present, future in there. There's opinion phrases. There's different examples of time phrases and things, and that just allows students to get to where they need to be in the writing exam. Repeated errors, obviously, when you've got like something specific that students are always getting wrong, I would get that into the retrieval practice, which is it's always ready on the slide. As soon as we're greeting them at the door in a target language, they come in, they grab their exercise book, and they would start writing on the whiteboard. I would never have retrieval practice. For me, I wouldn't have it in exercise books, because we try and reserve that for new information. That's why whiteboards are so useful at this point, because it's like low stakes. And while it's not meaningless, because obviously it's meaningful at that point, because it's not new information, it just meant to be a low stakes, sort of getting them into the lesson routine, recalling all that prior learning. And then 40 word tasks, you might just set a really simple, 40 words is 4 sentences, isn't it, really? What can you be talking about at this point? And that really helps them to get engaged as well, especially with higher ability groups. And then we've made it to my final slide. Thank you for bearing with me, Sophie. So this is something that I would always talk about, and we always talk about it straight from the off at the start of year 10 when we're doing an extended piece of writing. What do we have to include? And there's lots of different acronyms, but this is ours, action. So obviously you can see what it stands for there, and I would always get them to write in the margin as well as annotating the bullet points, past, present, future, conditional, or whatever, and then write action and tick them off every single time they've used an adjective. Tick it, and they can see that they're trying to get the marks for obviously both content and quality of language in there. Thank you very much for listening to me, and obviously if there's any questions at all, please let me know.
Thank you, Liam. That was brilliant. There were some great ideas there, and I think you're absolutely right in so many of the things that you said. And we have had one question actually, and I was thinking the same, from Elaine, who asked, do you have any issues with students using online translations and like ChatGPT, for example, when you set writing tasks, I know my students, I have lots of words with them. I said, if it's obviously Google Translate, I'm not marking it. What do you do with that?
Absolutely. So I think it's really important, first of all, to set out the reason why we wouldn't use Google Translate, but not to sort of, like villainize Google Translate. I would always say to them, online translators are absolutely amazing. They're really, really useful, but they don't work by writing full sentences in the English side and copying and pasting directly. Because I once had a student who, I said to him, this is Google Translate, isn't it? And he said no, and he swore blind it wasn't. He promised me it wasn't. And it was actually all written in Dutch. He thought Dutch was the same as Deutsch. So I said that's not quite what I've been teaching you for the last year. But anyway, so I would always say to them, if it's Google Translate, ultimately, I'm not going to mark it because I think it's not your work. It's not worthwhile. I want you to genuinely have a go. And if it means you're getting 3 or 4 out of 16, but it's your own work, then I would much rather that because I can help you with that. So it's as much as setting them up, saying, don't use Google Translate. It's good for odd words, but don't use it for full sentences. And it also doesn't tell you the grammar, the conjugations, and the correct context of like adjectives and nouns and things. And then just sort of facilitating that. Well, you need to try your best, even if it's lower marks than what you want at this point. Try your best, and we will work together to get it. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a brilliant. Thank you very much. It's definitely about setting up their mindset as well, isn't it? And being honest with them. We all use Google Translate from time to time for the odd word, but absolutely not worth it for full sentences. Brilliant. Right, I'm going to pass back to Esmeralda now. Thank you again so much, Liam.
Okay, actually, I think it will be Hannah.
That's not working. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's joined us this morning, and thank you for your participation in the chat. It's great to see everyone having a conversation about how they're using these ideas in their own teaching. And don't forget to nearly said Twitter, it's now X, to let us know on X how any ideas that you're going to use in your own teaching, and keep the conversation going on social media. Don't forget, you will get a recording of today's event using the sign up link that you've used to join today. And also I will be asking presenters after today's presentation whether they are happy for me to share their presentations on tests as a PDF version. So that will follow after the event. We will also be sending around a feedback form at the end of this event, just to get your feedback on, as we are CPD, of how we can improve, how you think the event has gone today, and also just to gather your views on our in-person events. Obviously, we aim to run at least one in-person event every year. The last couple of years that has been in Manchester, and we have our in-person event in the planning at the moment for our next in-person event, and I will be releasing information on that in the next couple of weeks. So just to keep you in suspense for a little bit longer, I'm not announcing it today, but we will be announcing that soon. Our next presenter is Anne Lies, and Anne Lies is joining us to talk about language learning in a primary setting. Anne Lies is a languages trust lead practitioner. She's trained more than 50 teachers in the Midlands to deliver languages within a primary setting through in-school training and support, as well as holding MFL lead meetings every half term. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'll just add your presentation to the stream, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all okay. I have got some of the primary school teachers that I teach with on the chat today. So if you've got any ideas, questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and they may be able to help answer as I go along. So I wanted to start off, first of all, looking at the Ofsted review of languages that was done in 2021. And I think there's some quite important parts there about it. So obviously my focus today is on primary and transition ideas, but I think as a secondary teacher as well, I think it's really important to know what is expected of primary teachers on that transition phase before coming to us in year 7. And the review really spoke to me, because it spoke about the fact that there's a real weakness between primary and secondary school. I think we know that. The consistency was a real sort of thing that they picked out there as well. And they also spoke about the fact that, you know, there was kind of not that balance between the speaking and the writing. So I've highlighted the parts there, and obviously you'll see it through the slides. And the other thing to note is the programme of study as well. So the programme of study, for those of you, the parts were highlighted. This has come up as all highlighted, so I'm not sure what happened there. So I'll pick out the parts that were supposed to be highlighted. I'll make sure it's correct in the PDFs. Is that real emphasis of that depth of knowledge and not that breadth? And I think what tends to happen is a lot of people look at primary and think that they need to do a lot of content, and that when they come to year 7 that there's an expectation they have a lot of knowledge in a lot of different topics. However, so what rings true to me in the programme of study is the fact that it's kind of that basic level, and I'll talk about what secondary school teachers have asked for later on, but it's really about that idea of presenting ideas that you see in number 6. It's about, in number 4, speaking in sentences, using familiar vocabulary and that basic language structures. And if you look at number 2, it's about exploring the patterns and the sounds of languages through songs and rhymes. So it's that real and I'll go through this in a second as well. It's that love of language that we need to capture in Key Stage 2. And it's not about having to kind of do lots all the time and make it really busy, but about getting that love of languages from the offset, really. So in the white paper, something that I found was particularly that rang really kind of true to me, that's I don't feel it's happening now in the kind of scheme of what we're looking at, is it was recommended that an hour of languages a week and having an immersive curriculum. They were the 2 main things that came out from it. And again, it speaks about motivation, and it speaks about students being able to see the value in what they're doing and what they're saying, and that they can use that language, and it's useful language, and it's not teaching them things that they don't see as being a useful part of their journey. And if we look into the second paragraph, it talks about the input. It plays a particularly important role in the middle stages of childhood. So, you know, from ages 6 to 7 to 11 to 12. So in the age of students learning a language, it is kind of their prime time to learn a language, and it's about making sure that we create that real rich and plentiful input, and not create that, you know, not take away that playfulness, and maintain that in a primary setting. And then Diane Pye kind of goes on in her review. So if you've not kind of been familiar with these before, Diane Pye does a lot of HMI primary subject reviews. So she kind of tells you what HMI inspectors have been trained within and what they're looking for when they come in. And I find that really useful to know kind of what they know before they come in. Not that we're obviously always working for a review, but obviously it's really important to know that, I think. And again, the bits that I was going to talk about aren't highlighted. So the main things I wanted to pick out were, again, it wasn't just a topic-based use of words, but there should be a strategic choice when you're using those words. So when, you know, those questions come in and why is that vocabulary been chosen, it's that the pedagogy to say, well, obviously this is useful, the students can use it, it's vocabulary they want to use, and she talks about grammar and the fact that there should be a clear sequence of simple grammar. It should be reviewed over time, it should be reviewed in different contexts, it should be easy to manipulate, and that students, you know, with the phonological sort of background of the language that they're learning, it should be systematically planned but continually reintroduced. And I think that's really important, the fact that phonics don't just sit as an element that begins, you know, in year 3, but it's continually reviewed all the way up until year 6, so that when they go into year 7, that transition, they've got a real strong phonological knowledge of that language. They've got an understanding of the grammar. And I think for me, particularly teaching in both primary and secondary, I think with the changes now with grammar in English, I think it's a real caveat that we can use to start teaching a language. So we can really start to say, you know about the present perfect tense, you know about it in English, this is how it would look. You know, I wouldn't explicitly teach the present perfect, for example. However, making those links, particularly when, you know, when they're getting up to their SATs, it's that real, that they've kind of got that knowledge all the time. I think it's really important to make those links for them so they can see that actually these links do transfer within other languages. So if you're not aware of this, The kind of 3 pillars of language learning are phonics, vocabulary, and grammar. So I've kind of touched on that already. But what I'm going to go through today is I'm going to look at those through the eyes of, through the lens of the intent, implementation, and impact process. So I think it's really important you're starting to look at an intent, whether it's Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, whatever Key Stage it is really, Key Stage 2 as well, I forgot that one, is to look at the intent. So what is the intention for the young learner? And I think it's, for me, about that character. What character are you going to build within a young person within that language? I've picked out things like being able to manipulate and differentiate linguistic patterns. Now, you can see that's come through in the programme of study, but I think that's really important no matter what key stage we're talking about. Obviously, the complexity will change, but I think that's a really important concept. Number 9, a learner who sees the value of being multilingual in our society. I think that's vital for any young learner that we're kind of working with, to see those things. So I think it's really important, to start with the intention, first of all. What do we want from our young learners before we start to go through the implementation? And then the implementation that I'm going to go through today, the one that I work with my primary school teachers, is we look at chunked vocabulary, and I know that's been spoken about already this morning, the EPI method, the flipped learning, because I think there's so much value to add in flipped learning, particularly as most primary teachers are not specialists themselves. I think it's really a vital part of learning languages at primary. Phonics, and then that balance between implicit and explicit teaching. So in terms of implicit and explicit teaching, this is kind of the balance that I think sits really well. I think it's that implicit learning all the time. And, primary time is really precious. So sometimes you only have a half an hour block or once a week. So how do you ensure that students are continually learning, and that, so it's half an hour. My quick math is saying that's 20 hours a year. That's 80 hours they're going to get from year 3 to year 6. And that's without any disruptions. In 80 hours, what can really be achieved if that implicit learning isn't there all the time? And then that explicit teaching at the top is that little bit that as a teacher you're there to guide, particularly as, again, most primary teachers are not specialists, so they don't have that confidence necessarily to always deliver content. So I'm going to show you how I think that works really well. So the explanations that I'm going to give today and the examples I'm going to give today are in Spanish, just to make everybody aware. So these are the phonics, and these are taken from Sue Cave, who I'm a massive fan of. Sue Cave did some work before on physical phonics, and these are an adaptation of her ideas. So it's a phonics system, but it has an action with it. So just to embarrass myself on a Saturday morning, I'll go through a few. So you've got an A, you've got an E. Number 3, you've got number 13, you've got one that the boys always tend to love, number 15, you've got a Y, number 20, obviously a bit more of a Spanish accent when I do it, but you can kind of get the idea. And the students are they love these. And as I say, they're continually repeated from year 3 to year 6. So it isn't just a staple. And what works really well is in assemblies. So some of the schools that I work with that do these best have regular assemblies where they will practice these. So I have a school where the head teacher is really into Spanish, and he will start off an assembly, doing some actions, and the whole of year 3 to year 6 in the Key Stage 2 assembly will repeat it. And again, it's that implicit practice throughout the week. So it doesn't have to necessarily be in that 30-minute block. Some sentence builders. So this is the EPI method, for those of you who know it through Conti, that, you've got the sentence builder, but then I always add that caveat of the actual picture of the phonic. Again, as a non-specialist, if they're thinking, okay, oh my God, this is a lot of text, which sounds are they going to get wrong? In the planning, it's there. So you can see that me llamo, the teacher can make a real emphasis of going, okay, I know that they're probably going to get those double L sounds wrong. In the ula, we've got the silent H. So they can, they can practice those. Relajada, they've got the ha sound in there. So it's just supporting that. Now, again, some of the best practice that I've seen is this being done in a register. Really simple way to do it. When the students come in the morning or in the afternoon, they do a register, and they're just reading out. So they'll read the name of the register and they'll say, for example, hola, me llamo Bob. Estoy muy bien porque estoy contento and then they'll carry that on. Now, when that's done regularly as a systematic process, it's very quick. It doesn't take much longer. But again, if you can do that 2 or 3 times a week, that, you know, when you speak to that student and say, oh, you know, in year 4, you say, how are you? They can reiterate a sentence in full because they continually practice that. And this is where it starts from. So that longer one there has been built up over time. So it's not, you know, they don't just do that straight away, but they've started off to begin with just saying, good morning, my name is, and I am good. Then they've then moved on to, I am good because I'm happy. They've then gone to, my name is Katerina and I am 2 years old. So you can see here, there's not just a standard pro forma, it changes all the time. So if anybody said, how old are you? They'd be able to answer that straight away. And that's kind of the thing that I really emphasize, that, you know, that's the question at the top. The question is, how old are you? And if the students say, oh, I don't know how to remember, I'll say, you do remember that sentence builder we've had before. And, you know, because a lot of the times they have those nerves. I remember once there was a deep dive and one of the inspectors came in and they'd asked them, what is your name? And they didn't know how to say that. And I said, well, we've shown you, how are you called? Because obviously we'd broken it down literally so they understood it. And they were like, oh, and they could do it straight away. And I think it's that. And I think it's particularly when you have those situations where you think, oh my God, you know, language is being deep dived. What do I do? This is a real support. And you can, you know, explain that and give them that scaffolding and that support. And again, some of the schools I work with have these printed out, you know, in like in a folder where they've got sort of a binder, so the students aren't sure, they can go up to that folder, they can find the sentence builder, and then it just reminds the students, and then they can put it away, you know. So it's that scaffolding in the moment, because, you know, when an inspection comes, it doesn't mean you've got a language lesson that day. You might not have a language lesson until the Friday and they come in on a Monday. Well, the students won't necessarily you know how to take that information because it's a Friday information. So that's how that builds up over time. And you can see, so this is to give you an idea, is a year 3 sentence builder from the first topic that they learn. And I'll go through that shortly. So for a year 3 to be able to recite this, I think is particularly impressive. But as I say, it's built up over time with a lot of implicit practice. So if I go back to this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you through the same vocabulary how we can break down different activities. So if I go back again to this, you can see here you've got the hello, my name is, I'm good because I am happy, I'm sad, I'm comfortable. And then you can see here in the beginning part of this dictation, hello, my name is Nuria and I am awful because I'm sad. I have 11 years old, I have blonde hair, blonde long curly hair. Okay, so that has all been practiced through the sentence builders. Then because we're in this topic now, so the second topic we've moved on to about describing oneself and others, they then can then say, I've got blue eyes, my friend is called Laura, and she has brown eyes and brown short hair. So that vocabulary there, you can see the purple is what they've learned through sentence builders and things like that. The blue is what they've learned through a different sentence builder on a different topic. So as much as that seems in year 3, that's a lot of learning to have done. Actually, when you break it down, it isn't. And then you can see, so that dictation, you can break it into 2 things. So the one at the top, you can print it off 3 or 4 places around the room, and you can get the students to go to the dictation, to read it, to memorize it, to go back and say it to their partner. And then it's kind of a bit of a competition of which set of partners around the room can get that full dictation written down. I can particularly my high ability students, I would say to them, I want it with all that, you know, the commas, the full stops. My low ability students in a class, I will say to them, look, as long as you've got the majority of it, you know, and I always tend to pair a high ability and a low ability student. That same dictation can be a different lesson, can be split into 2. And then you've got a partner A, partner B. Partner A is looking at the board, partner B is turning away from the board, and they're just reading what's on the board. So you can see that same activity can be done twice, but in different ways. And students never know it's the same thing, believe it or not. That same vocabulary then can be on the board, and then you're doing competitions where you're pulling out the English from the box. Students have whiteboards. So for example, I can see one there says, I am cool. So you pull it out of the box and they have to write it down. And I do it in groups. So I do like table groups of 5 or 6 students. And the idea is that all the students on the tables need to have the answer, because that's the differentiation there. You've got the high ability supporting the low ability to make sure all of them get it. That same text then can be broken into 8 sentences, and it can become a speed talking. So the students have to have 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and they have to see how far they can get down. That same text then breaks into what we call a trapdoor exercise, where as a teacher, in my head, I've picked, one of the 3, and the students have to try and work out what's in my head, and they love this one. So, and again, if it's my lower ability students, I will say to them, you can say it in Spanish. But if it's my higher ability students in that class, I'll say, no, I need you to translate it. Or I'll do like a point system where if you get it right and you've said it in Spanish, you get 1 point. If you said it right, you've said it in English, you get 2 points. And you'll really see the students trying to translate it. And, again, in year 3, translating from Spanish to English there's no real stakes on that. They do really well. Again, that same text here can then become a photo. And this is the bit I find most challenging, like who's the famous footballer at the moment? I kind of have to find out, like, who is the person that you need to know about at the moment. I mean, Taylor Swift tends to be a great one. They love Taylor Swift. But, and you can see here, if I click through, it changes. So you're talking about eyes, you're talking about hair. And again, it's just whiteboards, which one, describes this person, and having that conversation. That same vocabulary there becomes submarines. And again, they love this one, particularly if you do boys versus girls. And the same thing again, they can read it out in Spanish, or they can translate it instantly into English. So it's usually teacher versus student. And I'll say to them, so how many boxes have we got there? We've got 25 boxes. So I'll say to them, if you can guess where all my 5 submarines are in 20 guesses, you get, 5 minutes on, an online resource to practice the Spanish or something like that. And then they'll then do partner and partner, and then just simple little things like, pretend that I'm cheating and I've forgotten to add one of the guesses on or something like that. But they do really love this, and I cover it all up with the boxes and then take it away. Once they've then really secured that knowledge, we then move to, and again, this is following the EPI Marses process that Conti talks about. We then move to the no snakes, no ladders. So again, you can see on here, it's as it says, really, they'll roll a dice, they'll get to number 4, they'll have the tengo los ojos grises, and then they will have the 2 partners who are working together, and there'll be 1 third person who will have the answers. So they'll then translate, and the third person is saying whether it's correct or not. Now, that third person, I always use as my low priority student, because it gives them that confidence. They are in control of that game, and I call them the spies, and they love being a spy. And it may be, particularly in languages, we all know that somebody who potentially is a low prioritarian in another subject does not mean they're a low prioritarian in our subject. So I have some Romanian students who are very disengaged in other subjects, who absolutely love Spanish, and they are very high prioritarian in Spanish. They are really, really successful. However, there may be some students who maybe struggle in this topic, or have those difficult abilities to be able to retain it. They're the ones that I would choose for the spies, and they really feel successful because they feel that they're kind of in charge. So that works really well. And again, so that's the answer sheet that they would have. And again, this would then, sorry, my formatting is all gone here. So they would then work on the quiz trade. So if you look at this quiz trade game, it's exactly the same as the no snakes, no ladders, but what it has on each card, it has the answer. So this game is the same vocabulary, but the students will have the cards. And for example, they will then turn to their partner, this is in 2s, and they will say, tengo los ojos verdes. And the partner will then say, I have green eyes. If the partner gets it wrong, the idea is they have to correct them, and then they then put it to the back of their same pile. So they don't get to take it. If they get it correct, they then get to take the card off the partner, and then you'll give them, say, 10 minutes, and then you'll say stop, and they will then count how many cards they've got. Now, even though I've given an example here of 28, I tend to like the number 24 because it splits into lots of different ways. You can split it into 8. So if you've got a part, you've got 3, so you can't really work it out into partners. You can put it into 8. If it's partners, they then have 12 each. So it works a really good number, 24. So either 2s or 3s. But again, you can kind of go around in a circle if it's a 3. But the idea is, you give them a time, and at the end, they count how many cards they've got. The more cards they've got, the person who wins.
Sorry
So
to
you can-
interrupt, Liaz, you've got 1 minute left.
Thank you. You can see here the vocabulary is exactly the same for the two, so there's no change, and hopefully what you've seen with the activities that I've given you is there's no real teacher input. A lot of it is all the students, and as a teacher you're just kind of observing and making sure that it goes to plan. So I'll move a little bit quicker onto this one. So these then can become writing scaffolding and structures. So you can see here, you've got 4 pieces of writing. What students will do is they will highlight the parts that is consistent throughout all of the boxes. And then if you've got a student like Ahmed who may be struggling a little bit, you'll break it down into sentences so that he has it a little bit easier and it's a little bit more clear for him. And then what the students then do is the parts that are highlighted, all of them, they will keep those parts the same. Because, for example, my name is, or I am called, is the same for all of them. But then when it changes from Nuria to Ahmed to Alejandro, you would then obviously change that because their name would be changed. And that just gives you the balance between implicit and explicit. So what they've learned in that whole topic implicitly versus what they've learned explicitly. And the flip learning that I spoke about, we do it through Quizlet. So they will learn the vocabulary prior to a lesson. So again, that teacher doesn't feel like they're having to impart that information. And then in terms of assessment, this is how it would look. So that same box that I showed you with the writing structure becomes a Nuria is awful because she is tired, true or false. You know, that's a reading. Then you would have a listening where you would have the teacher would read out the word that's missing and then they have to write it in. That's a now listening activity. And a speaking is that quick speaking dictation that we spoke about. And then this is how we track it over time. So the way that I did it was I took the program of study, I took what the expectations were for each skill, and I mapped it from year 6 to year 3. And then it has a below target, on target, or above target. So each year we know, and we vary whether they do a writing, whether they do a translation. I'll just be 1 second. I'll go through the last bits. I think I'm on my time. Sorry, Hannah.
No, that's fine. I was just about to interrupt. So go on.
Thank you. So this just shows you our curriculum map. So what I hope you can see is it isn't about doing lots. It's about doing the same things, but that depth. And you will see from year 3 to year 6, we do, I would say 6 topics, but we do them very well so that they have that real depth of knowledge. And then the last thing I wanted to go through, because this is really important, and a lot of people always ask me that, is books. It's the kind of the Achilles heel, really. I think a lot of schools feel they have to have a book for each student, but actually, if you look at what Ofsted says, it says that they understand that they can't lend themselves as easy as other subjects to book scrutiny. So what we do in our schools is we have evidence books, and that actually it's so one of the people on the chat today, this is one of her books, and this is all the classes in a book, and it shows you over time. And social media, you know, we all have social media, and that does show learning over time, and it does show progress over time, and it shares with parents and all the stakeholders. And then I'll leave you with this. So what do secondary schools say that they want? And I think this is really important, that, you know, this is a survey that I did with secondary schools, and that actually they don't want students to know lots. They just want the basics. They want a skill focus, and they want them to know what a cognate is and the difference between a noun and adjectives and things like that. There are a few slides extra, so I'll include it on the PDFs. But yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Anne. Yes, that's brilliant. We've really enjoyed that, and it's great to have such in-depth information about the primary setting as well. So thank you for sharing that with us all. There's a couple of comments. Sylvia, I think, had a comment in the chat where she asked a question. I'm just trying to find it now. I've lost it since there were so many, about the dictation task and how does the table box dictation task work?
Table box dictation. Can I go back? Let me find the slide. This one here. Yeah, it'd be this one, I think.
I think it's that one, yeah.
Yeah. So the top one, I would print it out and I have it around the room. So the students will go to the dictation, they will read it. So for example, it's Hola, me llamo Nuria. They would then go back to their partner who's sat down and they would say, Hola, me llamo Nuria. Now, if it's a high ability student, particularly I find that I have the context that I work with, then we have Romanian students, we have Spanish, Italian. it's not really stretching them. So what I would do is I would go to them and say, right, I want you to do it in English for me. So they would run back to their partner and they'd say, hello, I am called. So I teach them I am called Nuria. And then they'll go back and they'll go, right, y estoy fatal porque. Then they'll run back and they'll go, and I'm awful because, and their partner's writing this down. So the idea is they have a script, so either in Spanish or in English. And then partner A and partner B is exactly the same. But instead of running around the room to do it, you have one that faces away from the board and one that faces to the board, and they do exactly the same thing. But what it does, hopefully I was trying to show, is the same vocabulary can be split into lots of different activities throughout. So the idea isn't loads of planning. It should be the same vocabulary, just practiced for that depth of knowledge. But actually, as a teacher, it's just adapting it. And, you know, we have those moments where our computer will break down or it won't work. Okay, I've got these I've printed out for next lesson. Let's just have a go at them. Or I've got some quiz trade. Let's do that for a minute while I'm just, you know, fixing the world. So, yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I think there's a couple more questions in the comments. If you don't mind, if you've got time to go back and just answer those, or if people who are watching it have any further questions, I'm sure Anne Lies will answer them on that. But thank you very much. That was fantastic. I'm just going to share, as I mentioned before, there's a feedback form, a Google Forms form that I've just shared in the chat with everybody. Just as I said, obviously we're running CPD events, and for our own CPD, in terms of improving our own events, just finding out how you found today's event, whether you've joined live or whether you've accessed the recording, what your favourite takeaway from today's event is. Obviously, we're only at the beginning of the event, so you might not be able to complete that just yet. In terms of, would you be interested in attending future events? As I said previously, we do hold our in-person events in England. So where would be your preferred location? It would be really useful to know where everyone would prefer. I've gone really general with Northwest, Northeast, Midlands, etc. I've gone really general there rather than cities. Otherwise, it will get quite difficult to then focus that. So just if we could have that feedback, that'd be brilliant. And knowing how could we improve our events, I have also included a question at the end of, would you yourselves be interested in presenting at our future events? We've got loads of new voices today. We've got a great variety of presentations, both from the primary and secondary setting. We'd love to hear from you. So if you'd be interested in presenting at future events, please leave us your email address there in that box on the feedback form, and we will be in contact with you with some more information about what is involved with presenting, both in person or online. Our next presentation is a familiar face, is Sophie Mills. Sophie presented at our Manchester event last year. She did a fantastic presentation, and we invited her recently to join the Teachers Talk Radio MFL team, and she's been a massive support to me in preparing for the event today. Sophie applied to present before she joined the team as well, and we just couldn't say no to such a fantastic presentation. So Sophie, I'm going to hand over to you. You are head of your department in your small school, and I'm sure you'll tell us more about that. And you're going to be talking about empowering poor attenders, while maintaining momentum in MFL lessons. So over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. So yeah, attendance, it does seem to be, doesn't it, the big issue of late, with the number of children missing from education increasing. And there's new rules and fines being introduced by the government that are making news headlines in our recent weeks. Now, I'm not here today to talk about attendance, but about the impact that this trend is having in our classrooms. And I'm sure all teachers feel that their subject is impacted by frequent absenteeism. And I don't want to argue that things are worse in MFL, but I do really believe that due to the naturally spiral curriculum used in our language learning, frequent missed lessons are really detrimental to our students. If students miss the lesson, for example, where you teach j'aime and je n'aime pas for the first time, when you come back to opinion verbs and teach j'aime jouer au tennis, these students already have extra work to do. If they miss that lesson where you introduce them to the idea of infinitives, then the next time you do opinions and actions in another topic, like j'aime écouter de la musique, they're really far behind. And even when you move on to using other structures which use infinitives, they find themselves still missing that initial step. So it's important that we try and fill the gaps as quickly as we can in order to keep students engaged, and willing to try. Now, I know I won't be the only person to have heard, well, I wasn't here, so I can't do this at the start of a lesson. Sometimes it does come from a place of genuine confusion and frustration, but I often hear this as a preface to someone not willing to put in what will be some hard work to catch up. And we all do our best to help our students in our lessons. I started my current role at my new school this year, and in my previous school, attendance was a little bit better. So teachers would, for example, note in key lesson vocabulary in the books of missing students, while the rest of the class were working independently. Or if we had a larger group of students missing, for example, for a sports fixture or something, then we could print out the key slides from that lesson and glue them in for the students. But this was kind of a few and far between situation. These strategies work when attendance is mostly good. However, when 3 or 4 students might be missing from every class, it just becomes unmanageable. And that was the situation that I found myself in this year. So I started thinking really carefully in a new setting where I generally have a handful of students missing from every lesson. What could I implement into my lessons to ensure that everyone was able to access the lesson and where there was no option to opt out because I wasn't here last time? And I wanted to do this without hugely increasing my time spent at the printer or handwriting in students' books. I thought the obvious place to start was my starter activities, because these should typically be the opportunity to help students connect to their previous learning. And as a trainee teacher, I remember being given this enormous PowerPoint of starter activities, from simple and snappy all the way to quite arduous, long-winded activities. In the end, inspired by fellow teachers in my department, I came up with this structure that I've used in almost all of my lessons for the past 3 years. And although I worried that students might get bored of this, I soon realised that the predictability and the routine nature of the task was something that students actually liked. I've rolled this out across our department now, and all students are used to coming in at the beginning, starting the starter activity without any need for input from the teacher, which is great when you're managing whatever is happening outside in the corridor or any issues that students come to you with at the door. So although my structure has remained the same, like I say, for over 3 years now, what I really began to think carefully about this year was the content of these starter activities being something that I could use to fill gaps for students who were missing and act as a brief review for everybody. I wanted to empower all of my students so that they felt that they were able to keep in step with the progress of the class. In this example, the previous lesson covered infinitive constructions with opinions. So students were able to say things like, j'aime rencontrer mes amis, I like to meet my friends. Therefore, the green box includes key phrases used with infinitives, and this was the essential vocabulary from the previous lesson. You'll also notice that the green box is extremely straightforward. And unless the words are really obvious cognates, I always give them options so they can do it as a matchup. That way it's 100% accessible, even to a new student who has never studied French before. I always say, well, let's copy down the French, and then if you're really stuck, you can fill in the answers when we go through. But I think there's at least one that you could guess in the meantime. The orange box demonstrates the key structures taught in the previous lesson and allows me to review these through questioning of key students, and I'll ask them for an explanation. So, for example, I might ask the 2 students who were here last lesson to give me the first 2 answers, and while they're explaining it to me, I might make some grammar notes on the board with the intention of leaving them there for the lesson as a reference point for those who weren't here. I find this is beneficial to everyone, really, as a quick reminder. Then I can target students who missed the previous lesson and ask them to work out the answers to the rest of the orange box with me, using the explanation they've just heard and the notes that are on the board. And this allows me to check their understanding and to know whether I need to find some time during the lesson to get to them individually, or whether this input's been sufficient to catch them up. Then in the red box, and what I call the go further task, my extension, I ask for something more complex. In this example, students are translating into French, which obviously requires application of the language that they've learned. Other possible tasks for the red box might be spot the error or match the starts and ends of the sentences in French. These boxes obviously are aimed at the students who were here the previous lesson and who got a good understanding of what you taught them. They'll have the notes that they need so they can continue their momentum and push themselves a little bit further. The way this works, obviously there's a lot of stuff in this starter, and I always tell students that I expect at least one box complete, but they can start where they like, so they choose an appropriate level of challenge for themselves. For example, students who attended the previous lesson and completed all of the tasks won't need to copy the words from the green box again, so they might choose to complete the orange box as a safe way to review. Or if they're feeling confident, then they'll choose to go to the red box. My students seem to have found themselves in quite a good routine now where they know which box they tend to be aiming for. Lots of my harder working students race to get all of the boxes complete, which obviously I always reward. I just find that it's great for allowing students who work more slowly to engage fully with the initial task, while students who work quicker still have something to do, which continues to challenge them. I'll just quickly show you a second example. Here we were building up to writing 90 words. The green box includes words and phrases which could be sentence starters for the writing task. And we'd seen this vocabulary in the previous lesson when we'd looked at a model text. What was good here was that when students were unsure how to start writing, I could reference back to the starter. Right, so your first bullet point asks you to write about your favourite festival. So let's have a look at number 1 of the starter. This might be a good way to start your first paragraph. The orange box includes key verbs. And in the red box, we've got one verb, but in lots of structures, so the complexity increases. Again, I would refer back to these as students ask for help in the lesson, i.e., right, well, did you get to the orange box in the starter? Check there first, and then I'll help you if you get stuck. While this style of starter, I will admit, is time-consuming to create, I am completely convinced that the time dedicated is worthwhile to not only give all learners a sense of success to start the lesson, but to address any gaps before they become insurmountable. Meanwhile, those hardworking students with the organised books have an excellent bank of vocabulary to help them keep making progress with their learning. If there's one thing I won't cut corners on with my lesson plans, it is my starter, as I really think it sets the tone for the entire lesson. Now, I did promise strategies for empowering poor attenders, so while the starter structure is my main success here, here are a few other things which I have tried. The first is making use of classroom displays to include the high frequency words like connectives and adjectives. These are words which students slowly learn over time if they're there, but students who miss lessons might never pick these up. If these are on the wall and clearly visible, learners are not defeated by something as simple as not knowing what cependant means in a translation task. And this allows them to be a bit more independent when they need to rely on you and their peers for help with lots of parts of the lesson. So I have one wall of my classroom is just covered in French connectives, adjectives, and key verbs. And I always say, like, check the wall, check the wall. Secondly, think carefully about your seating plan. Students who are often absent should not sit on their own at the back, although I know for lots of my frequently absent students, this is often what they would prefer. They also shouldn't sit with other students who are poor attenders as well. Sit them amongst students who are able to support them, the ones with the lovely organised books who I mentioned just now. Finally, I found that collating vocabulary and structures from each topic or unit on one sheet of paper, I know some people call these like knowledge organisers, is really helpful. I do this at the end of a topic to avoid them opting out of noting down vocabulary as we go. I know if they had that at the start of the topic, they'd say, oh, well, miss, I've got this already, so I won't write it down. But we all know the benefits of handwriting things for ourselves because it helps them put it into their long-term memory. This means that everything that has been covered is in one place for students to go back to easily. Even better if you can print it on a bright colour of paper so that it can be found easily in their books. So that is it from me. I I hope you found some of this interesting. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if you have any strategies that work for you, I'd love to hear them as well, because I know that this is not an exhaustive list.
Thank you very much, Sophie. That's brilliant. Loads of good ideas there. I think you're right. The starter task really sets the tone for the rest of the lesson, and it's really important to get that right, and particularly how to support those students who have poor attendance, because we want to welcome them back into the classroom and support them to move on, and how we can do that. And I think that's an important reminder. Anne-Lee S has just put, lovely. Love the idea. You taught so clearly, Sophie. Thank you. And there's lots of comments about knowledge organisers and great starters there as well. So thank you very much. In terms of, obviously, thank you. I've just looked at the feedback form and loads of people have already filled it in. So thank you very much for that. It's really clear there in terms of people's views, and there's lots of key things coming through there. So please fill that in if you've got any questions. I just want to share this comment for Darren. Darren is one of our speakers who's spoken a couple of times, I think, Darren, at our events. And I think this is a really nice comment to share. He's just put, do speak if you feel you have something to share. Doing my first ever event a couple of years ago completely changed my career trajectory for the better. And I'm sure, I know Darren said previously, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying now, if anyone does have any questions and wants to speak to previous presenters, Esmeralda's presented, Adam's presented, Sophie's presented. You've got a whole host of speakers who's presented today. I'm sure they wouldn't mind if you contacted them on X to find out more about presenting. We're always looking for new presenters and familiar voices within the MFL community. And if you're interested, just let me know and I'll send you some more guidelines in terms of what we ask from presenters and how that works. I'm going to bring on the rest of the MFL team. I'm not sure if Adam's having a few technical issues this morning, so I'm not sure if Adam's able to join us. But Esmeralda and Sophie have added you. Adam, yes, you are able to join us. Brilliant. Thank you, Adam. Morning, Adam. Thank you for joining us. You've had a bit of a chaotic morning technology-wise. So, but in terms of that, so I just thought I'd like to spend a couple of minutes halfway through the event here before Catherine presents, just talking about the MFL team. Adam and I coordinate the event at the moment and have coordinated the event. I think it's a year now together, haven't we? And Sophie's recently joined Esmeralda. You've been on the team for a while. I don't want to say, I mean, it's 2-3 years maybe now as well, which is brilliant. So I just thought I wanted to take the opportunity just to introduce ourselves. What's our experience in terms of teaching and our roles, and just a little bit more. So I'll start off. Obviously, I'm Hannah Purdy. I'm coordinator. I teach at a secondary school in Manchester, and I think I've lost track now. You stop counting at a certain point, don't you? I think I've been teaching 7 years, but don't quote me on that one. I think it's roughly 7 or 8, and then get into the debate whether you count the PGC year or not. And I'm also a designated teacher at my school for looked after and post looked after children as well. I've been coordinating Teachers Talk Radio events for, I think, since they began, when we were formally Teach Meet MFL Icons as well. Adam, I'll hand over to you. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm Adam. I'm Northern. I'm currently head of faculty at Mossbawn Community Academy in London. I've been here nearly 8 years, but I am moving on at the end of the year. I'm going to be joining United Learning as the director of MFL. I'm also an examiner, so I'm currently knee deep in mountain exams, and I also have written a few things as well. I'm a chartered teacher as well, and I think the things that I'm really, really interested in are kind of looking at feedback, and not just that, looking at students' attitudes towards MFL. And really, I think back to when I became a teacher, and one of the reasons why I love teaching so much, and one of the reasons why I work in the schools in which I do, is because I had some amazing teachers way back when. Elena Diaz was my Spanish teacher, and I want to give back to those kids like myself who maybe didn't have a lot when we were kids, but I want to really, really champion those kind of kids. So that's why I do what I do.
Thank you, Adam. Esmeralda, can we just go over to you, please?
Hello, I'm Esme Salgado, and I am currently head of MFL at Princess Risborough School. I just been there for a year. and very new to this position, but I've been teaching MFL for 24 years and in different schools, different backgrounds. And one of the things I would say, I love this event because I think it is a voice, a platform, basically to raise voices and to share good practice. I always get so much inspiration. It doesn't matter how experienced you are, what you've done, always something new everywhere. And don't be shy, come and join us because it would be absolutely fantastic to hear you. We do have events online like this one, but we also have events face-to-face if you fancy more. We're going to release the next event, later on in the event for a face-to-face one. So please come along. I think it's very important to share ideas. And one of the things I would highlight about the day today, the importance of this scaffolding. And I think it's been absolutely brilliant. And how much work, and great stuff is going on in the MFL community. I've heard so many comments that, we don't use the textbook so much because this is what we do, how we personalize our lessons. So we want to hear from you and see basically how do you do, what is the job that you do every day that is working for you.
Thank you. And Sophie, I know we've heard a little bit about you, but I only briefly touched upon your role, so we come back to you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I already just introduced myself briefly, but the reason that I'm so pleased to be part of this team now is my new job, I am a department of kind of 1.5. So I think in the MFL world, we're really good at sharing ideas, but we have to have the platform to do that. And I think this is a brilliant way to do it. I am the most inexperienced of the team. I've been teaching for almost 4 years now in the UK and previously taught a little bit in France. But yeah, I'm like Adam in that I was really inspired when I was growing up by amazing teachers. And I think that I am who I am today because of the opportunities that I got from teachers who were inspirational and who wanted the best for me. So that is definitely my motivation. And I'm sure we can all agree that that's a big part of why we get up every morning as MFL teachers who face a lot of adversity. So yeah, thank you all for being here today and keep sharing your ideas because I think it's an absolutely brilliant platform to do that.
Thank you very much. Christopher's just commented in the comments there about the PowerPoints. With the link that you've signed up on, you'll get a recording of the event. And as I said, I'll also be contacting speakers after today to ask whether they are happy for us to share those presentations, and we'll put them on the test platform under the Teachers Talk Radio account there, so that as a PDF, so you will be able to access them there. And I'm sure presenters, if they're willing to, won't mind sharing those themselves. So in terms of, but thank you very much. I think I've caught up with all the comments. I think in terms of the Google form that I've sent out for feedback, I think it does require a Google account sign in for you to be able to complete that, but it is anonymous. It doesn't pull through your email address unless you provide your email address at the end as a future presenter. And I've got lots of email addresses already on that, which is fantastic for the planning for our future event as well. Adam, shall I hand over to you to introduce Catherine then?
Yeah.
Hello. Yes. Oh, sorry, this is Piada. Sorry, I thought
No, Esmeralda, you go.
No.
For it. You go for
Go
it.
for it, madam.
I was caught off guard. You go for it. You go for it.
Completely misheard that one. Well, very excited to present to introduce Catherine Woodward. She's head of MFL and in secondary school, and she's going to be talking about the 3 pillars of vocabulary and the phonics and the grammar at Key Stage 3. So go on, Catherine. Okay, we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi everyone, I'm just trying to get my PowerPoint up. I've got it on screen, but I just can't seem to get it into presenter mode. So sorry, just bear with me a second. I can see it on my screen. Can you see it now in presenter mode?
You may know it's not there in presenter mode, but maybe you want to come out and then do it again. Going to present. Are you sharing? Yeah. Either you share your screen or
Yeah,
you
I've
just
got it. It's on my screen here. It's in full screen, but I can't seem to
Mhm.
get it onto your screen at all.
Oh, we can see it. We can see it. Okay, do it again.
I'll try again. I'll share again now.
Go to
Sorry,
present.
everyone.
Not
So I'll
at all.
go to present, slides,
Yeah,
or do I go to share screen?
that was another way of doing it, but otherwise you can just go and click on the slides.
Okay, I'll click on the slides from my computer.
Yep.
Okay.
This is the beauty of doing things live.
Absolutely. So sorry, everybody. I will
Not at all,
be.
not at all. Please do not apologize. The other way of doing it is you can actually share your screen as well, if that is easier.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'll try and share my screen instead because I've got it. So I'll just try and do it that way. That's what I've tried to do through
Yeah,
this.
definitely. We could definitely see your presentation there as sharing the screen before. So try. So you can go to present, share screen.
Let me
and probably
open.
that. Get your comments coming, everybody, as well, and do not forget to tag us. To do the tagging, okay, and with basically #TTR MFL. So I will put that there. So everything you are going to use X, and we would really appreciate it, and keep on getting all your comments as well here in the chat in the event. Right, how is that going, Catherine?
Well, it's live on my screen, but I can see from my other screen over here it's not on. So I don't really know how to get it up for you.
Oh, I can see this there. Okay, I got it there for you. There you are. I think we can see there. If you just go to the presenter. We can definitely see it, Catherine.
So what I'll do is I'll go through it just like that because I can't seem to present. It's full screen on my screen here, but I'll just click through like that instead. So I'll just get going. So I'm going to look at embedding phonics, vocab and grammar in the Key Stage 3 languages classroom. And the first thing I'm going to look at is the Borkum Review. So I've done a lot of work with the Borkum Review. And the first thing to look at is the fact that Part 3 of the Borkum Review is the systematic progress through phonics, vocabulary and grammar. So this is where I'm looking at today. This review is done by Sir Ian Borkum in 2016. I also had the opportunity a few months ago to hear Bianca Zemka speak, who is the HMI for languages. And she talked about the pillars for progression. And she talked about how vocabulary, phonics and grammar are not just topics. And actually speaking, listening, reading and writing are the vehicles for this, but these are the key pillars of progression, as we know. And she talked about how there should be a clear and logical thought about which sounds are taught, the order they're taught in, how these are then kind of pronounced for people, how the children learn to say it, where the tongue is in the mouth, and it shouldn't just be a case of just saying it. So what I do is I have a phonics of the day. So we only have year 7 and year 8 at the moment, and so with our phonemes, we have phonemes of the day. And my slides aren't the same as yours again now. I'm so sorry.
That's all right, Catherine. Can you see at the moment we do have the presentation up running for you? Can you?
I can see that it's still on the embedding phonics page.
Okay.
On the main screen.
So we move it there.
To the phonics screen for me, please. The phonemes of the day.
Yep.
I'm so sorry, everybody. This is not how I wanted it to go.
Please don't apologize. We are so grateful that you're here.
So how I introduce phonemes is like this. So I link this very much to Key Stage 2. And also Key Stage 1, how phonics are taught at school. I remember my children learning how to speak and how to do their phonemes in Key Stage 1, and they had things like ant on the arm, it's causing me alarm, the jolly phonics. At our school, we also have Fresh Start phonics in Year 7 for those children who are lower prior attainers and don't actually either achieve 100 in SPAG or reading. They have intervention and they do Fresh Start phonics. And so we've got phonics like A, may I play. So I taught this. I thought this would be a really nice idea to kind of link into our literacy strategy with German as well. So we have IE is always E and B. We've got EU, they always get this sound wrong. So this is oi in noise. So every time we teach them a phoneme, we teach it like this with a little rhyme, and they have to do this as well. So then when we go on to the next slide, this is a Year 7 example of how we would then put this into practice. So we would have missing phonemes. So the missing phonemes would be quite simple in a lesson. We would have introduced those phonemes first of all, and then we'd give them a little sheet. We would say ich spiele. They have to know that the CH is the H in human and the IE is the E in B, and they would write those in. So it's a really quick little kind of activity after you've introduced your phonemes. So that's a Year 7 example. This is a Year 8 example on the next slide, and you can see that we are introducing more and more phonemes. So we've got the systematic approach. We only introduce a few earlier on, and then we get to have more and more as we go along. So we've got this Z sound. The Z sound doesn't exist. It's quite difficult. So we have the S in Sumba, and we have the I in mice. They always forget in German to pronounce the I at the end. So we teach the word Porsche, which we all say wrong in English. It should be Porsche, not Porsche. We teach that right at the beginning in Year 7, and then they learn that. And again, going on to the second example, this is an example from Year 8, where we are kind of introducing the vocabulary before they even see the vocabulary through phonics. So we're consolidating the vocabulary learning and also thinking about those phonemes as well. So they would have einen, Rücken, and they would need to write the EI for einen, and then Rücken, they know that U in choose, and they would have to write that down as well. Again, it's just a little bit of way of introducing vocabulary whilst consolidating the phonemes as well. We also have, I was at the teacher meet last year in Manchester, and I heard Isabel Jones talking about the Freya model to introduce phonemes. So we've done this year as well. So we've got the definition of what these different phonemes might be, sort of the A umlaut, the O umlaut, the S set, which are completely different than English. And then we have examples of that, and we also have non-examples of that. So what do those examples look like? What are they absolutely not? And we try and give some fun facts as well. So we talk about the big mech. So they used to have that as well. So it's just a nice way of kind of introducing the phonics and consolidating them. We then continue with that phonics consolidation with dictation, but we do dictation in quite a strange way in our school. So we have our whiteboards. We'd ask them to write it down on their whiteboard, and then we ask them to hover their whiteboard and not show anyone. Then we would say, so when we've got the whiteboards hovered, we know everyone's ready. So we'd say 3, 2, 1, zeigt mir, and they would show us their board. So then we can go around and have that quick check. But then what we also do with our whiteboards is we say, don't rub it off yet. And then we'll put down the whiteboard on the desk. The am Mittwoch habe ich Erdkunde und es ist toll, which is the first sentence, would come up. And then systematically in their pens tick off have they spelled it right as well. So they're taking ownership of their own learning as well. So we're then building vocabulary here, we're building it in sentences, and we're also consolidating that phonic knowledge. And we continue that with am Freitag hat Mathe, aber es ist schwierig, etc., etc. So we'd continue in that way for those as well. We then would continue with paired dictation, where this allows them to speak out loud. Our children absolutely love paired dictation. I've never seen them work so well. And they are really clear about how they need to say the words so that they can understand them. They really try, and they don't rush through it. They don't say it really quickly. So partner A would have that sheet, partner B would have the other. So partner B would start and read out, Guten Tag, ich heiße Markus. Ich komme aus Österreich und ich wohne sehr gern. And they would have to pronounce that correctly. The pupil would write that down, and they swap over after that. So that's another way of, again, of consolidating vocabulary, but also those phonemes as well in context. We build up to a year 7 speaking assessment. This is how we do it in year 7. So there are 3 different forms on the next slide of how we would do this. So they have a reading aloud straight away in year 7. So they would have a phrase here. There's 3 examples, and they will have seen probably none of these words before, maybe moeder, but not a lot of them. And that's the point, that they should be able to read words that they have seen and not seen before. And we would highlight the phonemes so they can see what they are. And the little boxes underneath are for us to tick or cross them. So they will then get that feedback back. Yes, you know your O umlaut phoneme. No, you don't remember that D at the end of a word is pronounced as a T. So it's nice and quick feedback for them. And then we build onto that in year 8, where it is actually more complicated. They have sentences to read aloud, but they are not shown on the phonemes. They're not shown the phonemes or given them, so they have to just be able to read them. We give them a few minutes to kind of read this aloud, first of all, in their heads or out loud if they want to, but then they have to read it as a sentence. We don't say speed through it, but just kind of really thinking about how to pronounce those words. And this really does help with their pronunciation. We find that in German now they are not saying things like sport. They do actually say sport, because we've systematically taught SP as the sp sound. So if I go on to vocabulary now, there is, again, Bianca Zemke said we need a clear and logical thought before for the vocab we introduce. We need to revisit them, and vocabulary on its own is worth nothing. So as has been said already this morning, less is more. We only do 2 topics per year. We don't really rush through it. So we really think about what do we want to do. And the next 4 slides are just examples of sentence builders where we go back and retrieve knowledge. So the next sentence builder is one from year 7. So in year 7, we will simply introduce I am, very, and an adjective, connecting it with a connective and why. So I am very what, because but I am very what. That's year 7. Later on in year 7, we will come back to that with I love my brother, my mum, my half-brother, because he or she. So we've built on that I am to he or she or they are. But the vocabulary in the adjective column remains the same. So we're retrieving that knowledge all the time. The one in red, fleissig, is because that's a new word we've not seen before. So it's consistently consolidating the vocabulary of seen. In year 8, we then start talking about people again. We go back to year 7, we've taught heist and heißen, and we look again at those pronouns, he is, she is, they are, and the vocabulary again. We always teach an intensifier to go with the adjective as well, and you can see the words in red are the new vocabulary items that they've not seen before. And we see here my favorite teacher, my German teacher, etc. This builds then for later on in year 8, when we're talking about my role model, my favorite sports person, my favorite musician. And again, it's the same pattern. We reteach the heist, and when we go back and we look at those vocab items and the new ones. So we're getting quite, by the end of year 8, we're getting quite ambitious vocabulary with erfolgreich, ehrgeizig, inspirierend, begabt and berühmt. And it's always in that kind of form. So we're consolidating that vocabulary all the time. So this builds on to Rosenshine's principles of instruction. So with his instruction, we should always present new materials in small steps with student practice after each time. We should be guiding student practice to obtain a high success rate, and we need to require and monitor independence. So what does this look like in a classroom? So this is just an example of a year 8 sentence builder that we would have on, it's right at the beginning of year 8. And we would start by introducing our vocab in the following way. So we would not do the whole sentence builder in one lesson. We'd start with the vocabulary. So we cold call on the next slide. So as you can see, we're now building vocab and phonics together. So we have this idea. We've got the phonics on the next slide. So we've got the sh, the air, the sh, and the oi. And we've got the phonemes highlighted as well. So we want the children to say, we'd say to the children, right, we've just been looking at our phonics and now we're going to be looking at our vocabulary. I want everyone thinking, I would all like you to be ready with an answer. How do I correctly pronounce this phrase? We'd give them some thinking time, and then we'd say, all hands up when you know, all hands down, and then we would cold call for the answer. And we would do that all the way through. And the next few slides are just the same, so that we can skip through the next 3 slides. But what's noticeable in the next 3 slides is we're also teaching grammar implicitly. So we're teaching Sie lernt, wir lernen, ihr lernt, sie lernen, and we're teaching all these different ways of introducing the paradigm of lernen as well. So we're implicitly teaching the grammar as we go along. So I wanted to share with you after this a lovely way of doing practicing this called grudge ball. My children absolutely love grudge ball. So grudge ball, you will need to buy a little basketball net. So you put the basketball net on the wall, it's like sticks on the wall, and you give each team 5 lives or 3 lives, whatever you want to do. And then what you have to do is number the people in each team. So let's say you've got 4 in each team, you give them all a number, and they write the translation. So the first one will come up as Ich lerne gern Kunst. So that comes up on the board. This could be done in English or in German. Ich lerne gern Kunst. You put that on the board, and they have to translate that into English or into the target language if you want. As soon as they've done that, they have to stand up in their team as 4. Then you'll ask one of the team. So they'll say, I want all number 1s to stand up, and everyone else sits down. But the first team that stood up gets to answer first. If they get it right, they take a point off someone else's team. If they get it wrong, it's okay, we just continue. But if they get it right and they've got that point, they then come up with their ball, and they can throw the ball in the basketball net. And if they get the ball in the basketball net, they keep that point for themselves as well. So it adds on to their point score. It's really competitive, and they really love how this can work as well with kind of consolidating that vocabulary. So, and this is just a nice quick way. Every lesson I get that. Please, can we play grudge ball today, miss? On the next slide, we've got something called another way of consolidating it, and this is called Banzai books. So Banzai books is, again, on a whiteboard, they're given 100 Banzai books, mysterious books. I always talk to them about, we're not betting here. It's not a real thing. It's just me pretending. And they would be given 4 options. So all they need to do, and it depends how you want to do it for your higher or your lower ability. If you want to get them to write the whole sentence out or the whole phrase out, that's absolutely fine. And they write it on the board. Again, it's the same as we did before. We hover our whiteboards, 3, 2, 1. Show me, and then we go through. Is it A? Is it B? Is it C? And what they do is, if they've got that right, they double their books. So they go from 100 books to 200 books, and they absolutely love it. It's really competitive, and they really are thinking, everybody's thinking, we're building ratio, everyone's thinking about how do we get all of those words right and phrases, and it builds throughout. So we've got that one, and then we can build up to different sentences. We build up, so some Frühstück, and then we've got it in a full sentence. And then we can go talk about on Sunday, I drink coffee, etc. And then we build up to at the weekend, I eat muesli because it is healthy. So it's absolutely building up that vocabulary and the grammar as we go along. One pen, one dice is a brilliant game. My children, again, love this. And this is just copying. I know this sounds ridiculous, but sometimes I find that when we do copying, they still copy wrong. So actually having the chance to do this, and they absolutely adore it. And I know you have to deal with the dice noise, but they do love it. So they all have one pen and one dice, and they have to throw a 6. And as soon as they've thrown a 6, they can write. When the other person throws that 6, they take the pen out of their hand in a nice way, and they continue writing, and it's the first one to finish. So again, we're consolidating the grammar here because we've got it in I, you, he, she, it, we form and you form. We're looking at those different phrases. We're looking at vocabulary, and we're consolidating it, the grammar as well. So if I move on now to the grammar slide, we are now looking at, again, Bianca Zemke talks about moving from simple to more complex, and more importantly, being able to use it independently. And that grammar needs to be taught explicitly. So when we look at this, again, we're thinking about Rosa principles of instructions, that we should present new material in small steps, we should provide models and guide the practice, etc. All our students at our school have a vocabulary a grammar booklet, and it is the same for all sets, top to bottom, and we use that in every lesson. And this is partly because of a cognitive apprenticeship. Collins, Brown and Holland talk about making thinking visible, and that you've got to observe a master doing it before you can get those skills and use them yourself. So we will absolutely talk about the different parts of what we need to learn and model our thinking through that, model our metacognition. So this sentence builder on the next one is color coordinated. And with this sentence builder, we will look at the fact that the adjectives come before the noun. And when adjectives come before the noun in German, they must agree. We always introduce vocabulary and grammar in this way, and the fact that's in different colours, the pupils can already identify that the top level is masculine. So they can then I can say, well, why have I put that in blue? Well, it's in blue because it's masculine. Oh, and what can we notice about the ending of those adjectives? En, and we will write en in our box in our top on our top line there, so they see it. We'll write e in the middle one because that's the ending for feminine in the accusative case, etc. So they will absolutely see it, but I will talk through my process of why I've done that. So I've got this because. And then this is the last kind of little bit I just want to share with you today. This is an example of something from our grammar book. Everybody has this. So year 7 and year 8, they are absolutely unified and standardized across the whole department. So it will be retrieval practice first of all. This is a year 8 example on the verb lernen. In year 7, we will have learnt spielen and wohnen, which I'll come to in a second later. So we will go back and talk about, can you remember how to conjugate regular present tense verbs? So we will talk to them, we will ask them, we find the infinitive, we take off the en to form the stem, and we add the correct endings, which will then fly onto the whiteboard and with the endings in, and they will have that in their grammar book to write down. We teach grammar, especially the present tense, through a flower. And I know a lot of people will do this anyhow, but we talk very clearly about modelling it. So I would talk to them about spielen. And so I would say we have a seed and we plant this seed. It's like when we plant a flower. We plant the seed in our plant pot. And in our plant pot, that seed will grow. What does it grow into? It grows into a stem. But as it's grown into a stem, it's changed. So can you see spielen's got an en, and then spiel has just the stem. So I'm talking them through my thought process, how I get from spielen to spiel. Then I've got a stem, but then I need all my petals around the end. So I need my pronouns, and these are my petals. What are my endings? And we put our endings in there. So we link like that. We then link back to prior learning. In year 7, we look at the wohnen and spielen on the next slide, and they will see that. So this is consolidating prior learning. And then they know that, and then they, on the next slide, will then put that into practice. So they'll see the verb lernen, and in their book, so we've kind of guided their practice so far. We've reminded them of how we do it. We've done the flower. We've looked at 2 verbs previously. What do we do here? So here we have lernen. So how do I make the stem? Remember, we take off the en, and then what are our pronouns? And we look at it like that. Then again, this moving from modelling to independent work, we would then do an I do, we do, a modelling. So I would start with I do. So I would have ich lerne Klavier, and I would talk through my thought process. So I know ich means I can see lerne has an e on the end, so that must be that's our flower pattern. That's absolutely right. So this means I learn the piano. I'd also probably pick up the misconception here that Klavier in English, we would say the piano, but you don't in German. So we don't need that extra word. So let's have a look at the next one. We're not on ich now. We are now looking at do. Oh, look at our ending. We've got st at the end. So we've got to do that. So I would get my highlighter out under the visualizer, and I would highlight do and the st, and I'd translate that with them. Again, I'd go back to ich lerne, the next one, and then, I'd look at 3 and 4 and think, oh my goodness, we've got the 2 same pronouns here, but we've got 2 different endings. What do we know about pronoun sie? That means she. And then what do we know about the pronoun sie with an en? That's that one. And then we'd go on to the we do, where I would then get them to work with me to do it. So the I do is when I'm modeling my thought process. The we do is when they're doing it. And the you do, at that point, we'd be doing it all by themselves. And that's me. So thank you very much. I'm sorry that my PowerPoint slides haven't worked very well today. If you've got any questions, please do ask.
I think that was fantastic, Catherine, with such great ideas and a very good comment. I think everybody loved your crutch ball game. There were a lot of ideas coming that way. And I think it was lovely as well how everything that gets embedded. So you got the phonics, you got the vocabulary, you got the grammar, how everything comes together, and how there's a lot of thinking and making the students think. I think that is really, really important. So it's not just about telling them this is how you conjugate the verb, but what are the patterns? What can you see? And the communication takes over before you do that. I think that was great. Do we have any questions in here as such? Because I think that it's been, as I said, your game has been really, it's really definitely been a winner. Everybody's like, I love that game. So that's absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much. And down to Hannah now.
Thank you very much, Esmeralda. Going on to our next presentation is from Hannah Foot. Hannah is a Key Stage 3 to 5 teacher of Spanish and French with Spanish specialism, and having been in the career for 6 years now, she is also an ITT mentor. Hannah is going to speak to us today about creating spontaneous speakers for the GCSE and beyond. So over to you, Hannah.
Thank you very much. So my PowerPoint should just be loading. There we go. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak this morning. I really appreciate it. I've just put my X handle there, I guess it's called now. I'm trying to get a bit better at sharing and getting involved in conversations on X. So if you've got any questions afterwards, please let me know in the comments or come and have a chat on there. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context for my school background and where I am, and how that might be a little bit different to yours. It might be the same. So at our school, we have at GCSE, we have class sizes of anywhere between 18 to 25-ish. We're mixed ability, fully mixed ability with foundation and higher students in our classes, which of course presents some challenges, but also has its advantages as well. We typically will have a new class in year 10 and stay with them throughout the GCSE. We typically have 5 hours per fortnight, and I just added that bit in there as well. So I'm focusing here on the third part of the GCSE speaking exam, and I'm sharing probably 3 or 4 activities that have worked really well over the last couple of years and have resulted in some really, really strong scores from students on the speaking exam, as you can see there. So the first activity that I wanted to share with you, and again, you're probably not going to hear anything new here, nothing groundbreaking, as other people have said. The animations haven't worked here, so this would look a lot better if they had, but here we go. So the first activity I use this almost religiously every single lesson with my year 11 cohort. I introduce this to year 10 classes. So I will show them a topic on the board, and if this had worked perfectly, then the first topic you would see in the box in blue at the bottom would be los trabajos. So we would have studied that topic maybe earlier in Key Stage 3, or potentially we would have covered it in the GCSE in year 10 or earlier in year 11. So the first time that I introduced this to year 10 classes, I'm very conscious of trying to encourage them that speaking doesn't have to be as scary as it seems. And I know that we all probably have some year 11 students who are absolutely petrified of sitting with us in wherever it might be and doing that speaking exam. So I want to try and get them feeling as confident as possible at speaking spontaneously before they get there. So the first time I do this task, I've got them working in pairs. The person on the left of the desk, for instance, is listening really carefully to what their partner is saying. And you can see in the orange box here, if I'm doing this initially, I might have the conversations of, okay, if los trabajos is the topic and I'm asking you to speak for 30 seconds, or possibly more, I tend to go over 30 seconds and sell it as 30 seconds because they end up being able to say a lot more than they think. So initially I will have this conversation. What can we talk about on this topic of los trabajos? Well, we could talk about what a family member does for work. We could say their opinion of it. You know, for instance, mi padre es cocinero y le gusta porque es gratificante. My dad works as a chef. He likes it because it's rewarding. We could then also say what we do for work. We could also say what we used to want to do for work. And lots of my current year 11 cohort beautifully use the siempre me ha gustado la idea de, being whatever it is that they might be. I've always liked the idea of being, beautiful past tense in there. And then also thinking about our ambitions for when we're older, lots of easy opportunities to throw in some spicy structures, as I like to call them. So, a cuando sea mayor, así pudiera elegir, when I'm older, if I could choose. So I sort of give them these ideas, plant the seeds initially, and then I'll set a timer for one person to speak for about 30 seconds, just speaking. They can't stop. They've got to keep thinking of more and more ideas. And then I'll ask the person who was listening, tell me something Bob said, tell me something Joe said, Oh, well, they said that they would like to be a chef when they're older. Oh, did they use that spicy structure cuando sea mayor? Yes, amazing. Okay. And then I'll show them another topic on the board. So you can see, for instance, here, el ocio, that would be the next topic. So the other person would now be speaking, and the initial speaker is now listening really carefully. And again, what can we talk about? Well, we can say that I love to play football in the park with my friends, or the cinema, as I'm sure we've all heard millions of our students saying in the speaking exams recently. Everybody goes to the park or the cinema. We can also say something we don't like to do and why we don't like to do it. And I guess this pulls in from Vincent's presentation this morning. If you were listening as well, we're trying to think of ways in which we can just extend and further develop our answers. So this I use almost every year 11 lesson at the beginning. It just takes 5 minutes to do. I get a little bit picky, and if I hear lots of aburridos or lots of divertidos being thrown out, I might put some language on the board that I'm banning. I'm saying, okay, I'm bored of hearing the adjective interesante, don't want to hear it anymore, think of something else. Just again, to keep trying to encourage them to think of different ideas and keep speaking for as long as possible. I know that they won't speak for as long as possible in the actual exam, but I found it to be really effective in just getting them talking. There's no pressure, it's very low stakes, and they get to see as well as I'll typically do 4 topics, so each person will speak twice, and they might also identify then a topic that they need to go back and do a little bit more work on. A second idea, again, this would be beautifully animated if they were working, but you've got it all at once. So this has a simple question, one simple question: ¿En qué te gustaría trabajar? What would you like to work as? And students have to work by responding out loud in Spanish to the question. So again, we're in pairs, and let's say if I were answering first, I'm creating a response to that question spontaneously out loud, and I have to include in my answer, I have to include those 3 boxes in grey. So my answer must include cuando era joven at some point when I was younger. It has to include me interesa, it interests me, and it has to include voy a hacer. So you can see I'm really trying to push certain structures here. I'm pushing the use of the past, present, and future tense. And my partner, who would hopefully be listening to me, is just going to keep a tally on their fingers of how many of these phrases I've used. So if I've used cuando era joven, yep, I've got that one. Oh, then I've also gone into me interesa, etc. Then the orange box would magically appear, and the other partner would have a go at answering the same question, ¿en qué te gustaría trabajar? They've now got 3 different phrases that they have to include in their answer. However, if you're feeling spicy, if you're feeling up to it, you can also try and add in the previous 3 boxes in grey. Again, the partner would just be keeping a tally on their hands of how many that person's managed to include. And then you might do it a final time, and you might do it a 4th time if you wanted to make this fair. So you can see in each of those coloured boxes the sorts of structures I'm trying to include. I'm trying to get at least 1 tense, mainly 2 here in each answer. So I'm trying to get students to extend their answers to be becoming more routinized, I guess, in including different tenses, including different opinions, and trying to include a bit of spice where we can as well. Students really love this because they've kind of got the freedom to answer the question. You know, there's no barriers, there's no specific way in which they have to answer the question. They've just got to keep talking. And again, I might set a timer for 30, 45 seconds. As I set the challenge of including more and more phrases, then that time might go up to a minute. A third task that I have found to be quite effective is this one. Absolutely not my idea. I'm sure that everybody has tried this task at some point in time. I have been working recently, and I know there's a couple of other speakers who have as well, on proofreading and editing some EPI books that have come out recently, and this is a task that I've adapted from there. So I used to do a survey with my classes at GCSE quite regularly. However, I just gave them the top row. I just gave them the question in Spanish and English. And what I found specifically for potentially my foundation students, or students who, as Vincent talked about earlier, they sometimes struggle to come up with ideas, I found that by providing an example, they can then see a good way of structuring their answer, and this then gives them a bit of an idea as to which bits they might change to suit them. Notice the challenge there as well. So some students, you might have found if you've done this survey yourself, some students will say the same answer again and again, which is great because that answer is then hopefully going into their long-term memory. But actually, if you can give a different response to every person, then you're really, really demonstrating your breadth of vocabulary, which is brilliant. And my final activity then, which I think I've got time for, this one has, when I'm planning this task, I'm thinking specifically of higher ability students, and I'm also thinking about those students that I'm going to try, that I'm hoping are going to carry on to Key Stage 5. We're quite lucky in our current school that we offer A-level Spanish, French and German actually, and we have really strong uptake in recent years. So this activity you might have tried. So the task is called Taboo, and I would print out each of those pieces of vocabulary, el fútbol, los caramelos, etc. And they'll just have a pile of pieces of paper. Again, they're in pairs, and they would have to try to explain what the word is without saying the word. So you can see the example there of football. So the Spanish there is an example saying it's a sport that you play in a team. Normally players play in a stadium. You need a ball. So hopefully you might get to the answer of football there. Or for instance, el cine, maybe you end up saying something like, me gusta ir allí para ver una nueva película. I like to go there in order to watch new films. So you can see how we're trying to think really carefully about getting them to create their own sentences. Of course, there's some consideration that needs to happen in terms of the language, and it might be that you would have to provide some structures for certain students in order for them to be able to speak accurately in the you form or the they form, for instance. But this is really nice and is one that works quite well on that transition lesson when Year 12s are getting a taster of what Spanish might look like or what French or German might look like at A-level, and has worked pretty well for a high ability Year 11 as well. So they are my 4 activities, I think. Hopefully that's of some use. Again, I know it's nothing groundbreaking, but hopefully some tips that you might want to try in your lessons. Some of these activities as well, I have also started pulling down into Year 9 as well, just to kind of take away that fear factor of speaking out loud, and try to make it more low stakes. So if anything's not clear or you've got any questions, please ask. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Hannah. That was some absolutely brilliant ideas. We are, like you say, it may not be anything groundbreaking, but we get into a rut, don't we, with the same activities, and it's great to hear them re-explained and from different people's point of view as well. There's definitely a couple in there that I think I need to try with my Year 10s next week, so thank you very much for that. I don't think there are any questions in the chat, but just some really brilliant comments. Wow, A-level in all 3 languages, that is the dream. We would all love to be in that position. So that sounds brilliant. But we know we can reach you on X if anybody does have any questions. Hannah's handle was in her slides and is also, I've retweeted it a couple of times now, so you've got it there. Right then, so our next presenter is Georgia. Georgia is going to talk about incorporating some new GCSE style tasks in at Key Stage 3, which is going to be really useful as we all start thinking about planning for next year, ready for the new GCSE. Georgia is head of MFL, and she's also a PGC and an ECT mentor. So Georgia, is over to you. Ooh.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you. I'm just trying to find your slides, Georgia. Georgia, have you uploaded your slides yet?
I did send them over.
Okay, they're not in the... Okay, you'll just have to bear with us 1 minute while we find Georgia's slides. Can you, if you click on the bottom
Shall
where
I
it
do
says
that
present,
from my
Georgia?
end?
Yes, please. If you go at the bottom at present, and then you should be able to add them there. we've got them now. Brilliant. Thanks, Georgia.
Cool.
Over to you.
Thank you. So good almost afternoon to everyone. It's been really interesting seeing everyone's presentations as well. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been trialing this year, and especially at Key Stage 3, but obviously will be activities that I'm hoping to also use with Year 10 and Year 11 for the new GCSE. I started as a new head of department this year, so I didn't really have a lot of time to kind of revamp the whole curriculum. And I think it's also actually not necessary for us to revamp the whole curriculum, because the new GCSE, it does have new tasks and things like that. But I think there's a lot of things that we can reuse and adapt from what we already have. And we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because a lot of the things that we've been doing already will work just fine in the new GCSE. So, not sure if you can see. There you go. So the key changes that I was thinking about, because obviously, as I said, we're not going to revamp the whole thing. So I was just thinking about the key changes. So in the speaking, we have the read aloud and the follow-up questions, which is a completely new task. The role play now with the prompts in English, and we are using Edexcel. So they have this set scenarios that you're going to be working. So it's not just, you're going to be at a random place with a random person. They're going to have this, is either a hospital or a hotel. So I think that will be quite useful with our planning, so we can teach those transactional kind of language for students to use. And then we are also thinking, sorry, I can't see the rest of it there. There you go. So specific guidance for the photo cards. So they will have the bullet points telling them you have to talk about people, location, and activity, which is something that wasn't as obvious in the current GCSE. They was just, describe this picture. There wasn't any kind of mnemonic. We've all used the palm and the pause and everything, but now it's explicit in the GCSE. And then for listening, we got the dictation that is something that is new as well. And then for the writing, thinking about the prompts that are now going to be in English rather than in the target language. So that's also something for us to think about. So I'm just going to give some examples of some activities that we did in lesson, and then how we use those in kind of an assessment for the different years. We have a 3-year Key Stage 3, so it'll be from Year 7 to Year 9. So in Year 7, we're doing a lot of work with phonics, and I know other presenters have talked about it as well. So really drilling those key sounds and the correspondence, the SSC, that will be really important for the new GCSE. So in lessons, we might do some quick fill the gap activities, like you see there in French, and then we'll explicitly hide those key like the silent H in French and the GN there, for example, to get students to really think about, when we're pronouncing those words and what the sounds, how they're represented. And some other, as an example there in Spanish, just literally getting sentences that we used before in a translation activity, and then I just covered some of them and I turned that into a dictation activity. So it's really kind of minimizing our workload as well, reusing some activities that we had before anyway, not to reinvent the wheel or anything. And then in terms of the assessments, I've used the template from the specification, the sample assessments from Edexcel. So we've used that as their, so we do kind of 2 assessment points. They'll do like a writing task, and then we'll do another skill. So this one was low stakes because we got them to mark it themselves. So we've got the sorry, I can't see the next bit coming up yet. There you go. And then you've got we use the mark scheme there, similar to the GCSE. So it's just getting them familiar with that structure and the template of what it's going to look like. As I said, we did it as low stakes, so students were marking it themselves, you know, self-assessing or peer assessing, because we're not really want to just, you know, you're in year 7, we're already preparing you for the GCSE. We have to really balance that, you know, we have to expose them to those kinds of tasks, but we also don't want to kind of, you know, freak them out too much. So it's just doing as a low stakes self-assessment, peer assessment, just to get them practicing. And then for year 8, what we looked at was using the role play, but getting them to do it first as a writing task to get them to really think about how they're doing that. So in lesson, the one I chose in year 8, we were doing the topic of food. So it was quite nice to use the role play of, you know, you are at a restaurant and you need to book a table, you know, order your food, etc. So in lesson, we might do something like this. They would have the conversation in the wrong order, and then they would have to put that in the right order. And we have mixed ability, so I would have the English there, for example, and color coded to help students put that in order. And then there would be some extra activities there. So after they've got the conversation in order, then they can see, you know, what they've ordered and then do some challenges there, etc. So this would be a preparation for the role play that then they would do as a writing task. So if we go to the next bit, that's what it looks like to the students. So the beginning there is exactly like it looks in the GCSE, but I've actually put the teacher questions as written questions, and then in the line they just have to use the task in English to write down what they you know, how they would answer that question. And then I put a little ladder to success there at the bottom, so it would be very clear for the students the things that I wanted them to include. And I said that, you know, I don't want one word, you need to develop as much as possible. So I know obviously in the actual role play, they don't have to develop as much, but we're doing this as a writing task, so just getting them into the habit of doing that. And there's no issue if they do that in the role play, it's good practice anyway. And then I've got an example next of student, sorry, that is just a little bit bigger there so you can see, because I know it was quite small. But then I've got an example there from a student, and we found that it works really, really well. And students, after they've done this, and this one I marked myself, but we can also get them to mark it themselves on the board. And then after, we use this as a speaking task. So after they had it, you know, they knew it was correct, then they could practice with their partner. And then for year 9, we were looking at the photo cards. And then now that they have this explicit, you know, people, action, location, I didn't like PAL as a reminder. I thought it was a bit boring. So I just changed location to whereabouts to do a paw, because you can put a nice little dog's paw there. And I just thought it was nicer for them to remember. But then using this kind of grid, so they've got their description there for the people, the activity, and where they are, and then a challenge for them to add some opinions. So this is something that they would have, and it's got lots, so they would have this on a little mat so that they can recycle that language for different kinds of pictures. So we would do an example with them. Sorry, can you just go to the next bit, please? So we do a model answer with them, and just getting them to think about that success criteria, and then a challenge there, and then give them another picture for them to do some independent practice as well. And then just getting them to think about those bits of information that we want them to include. Oh, I think they went a bit too fast. And then, but you can see that just kind of giving them a more simplified version of the bigger one on the board if they're doing that as a pair activity, just as a little, you know, tool to memorize, to help them on the board when they're doing that activity with their partner or with in a small group. We might do that as a mini whiteboard as well. Love mini whiteboards. They're great for lots of different activities. And then finally, we're thinking about the writing. So I think we all use writing frames at some point, or sentence, what's called, they call sentence structure strips. They go alongside the structure strips that they are. So now in the new GCSE with the bullet points in English, I think it will support some of our less confident students, because a lot of them struggle to understand what the bullet point were asking them to do, and then they would just give up because they would just see the words that they didn't know, and I was like, I don't know what I need to write about. So I think having the bullet point in English will support some of our students, but we need to get them to practice that as well. And I think this is quite a good way to help them but not give them the answer. So you have it in English there, you know, start with a time marker, and then you might give them the time marker to get them started, but then, you know, remind them, you know, give detail about this, use a connective, finish with an opinion, etc. And then you always have a little challenge there. You know, if you have different tiers, different abilities in your room. And then you've got, you know, one for your present tense, and then you have one for your past, the opinion, your past tense, your future tense. And obviously, we always encourage them to add opinions for all of them, but I think it's a nice way to structure it to support students for their writing task. But yeah, nothing new, but I just thought it was an interesting way to see some of the ways that we're trying to incorporate those new GCSE tasks at Key Stage 3 to prepare them for this new adventure that's going to be the new GCSE.
Thanks, Georgia. That was really interesting. I know that we've all got lots of thinking to do, haven't we, about the new GCSE, but I think you're right. We don't need to reinvent the wheel completely, and we don't need to sort of completely start again from zero. There's lots that we're already doing that's going to be relevant. So that's really reassuring, isn't it? Thank you so much for your ideas. I'm sure that's lots of good takeaways that people can go away with today. So thank you very much. Right, I'm passing back to Esmeralda now.
Hello, everybody again, and I am very honored to introduce Francesca Gault and Vicky Purdy. So we have a double act now. And yes, so they are going to be talking about visualizers. So I can't wait for this presentation. I know a lot of people use the visualizers, and I think that'll freshen up, and also new ideas in it would be really, really welcome. So up to you, ladies.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Vicky, and I'm co-presenting with Francesca, and we both work at Eastleigh Academy, and we're going to talk to you today about visualizers and how we've used them effectively to essentially build motivation so that our students are writing longer pieces of work, essentially, and really enjoying the work that they're doing there. So just to give you a little bit of context about our school, so I work as assistant principal at Eastleigh Academy. We are a very diverse school. We work as part of Diverse Academies Trust. We've got over 1,000 pupils on roll. We're in a semi-rural community, and our students come from a really mixed socioeconomic background. And our overarching curriculum aim here is to give students a broad and balanced curriculum and essentially really ensure that they love what they learn at school. And we've got our core values of empower, respect, and care. We've been on a really big journey as an MFL faculty, so I'm just going to pass over to Francesca now, who will talk a little bit more about our faculty.
So hi, I'm Francesca. I am head of MFL at Eastleigh Academy, and we teach French and German, and we teach in mixed ability groups, and we are an option subject at GCSE. We've got quite a small department of just 5 people, but there's loads of expertise and loads of experience within that department. It's also quite a diverse dynamic. So we've got SLT in the department, we've got part-time members of staff, and a real range of interests. So we find that our faculty time is really, really precious, and our key priorities are kind of defining those is really important to us.
Okay, so why visualizers? This was actually meant to look like a roadmap, but I'm not quite sure why it looks the way it does on the screen, but I'll talk you through it in terms of how we came to the conclusions that actually visualizers would be a really good bet for us in terms of moving our students forward. So we essentially triangulated some data here, and the first part of the jigsaw came down to exams analysis. And when we looked at this in detail, we compared it against schools that were very similar to us, and also nationally. We realised that productive tasks were our focus area. So we knew that our students were getting a lot of classroom input, but actually that wasn't translating into an exam scenario. And we could see that across both French and German, and across both foundation and higher tiers. We knew from this analysis that actually the receptive tasks, that our students were doing really, really well in it. But actually what they weren't doing was connecting up the vocabulary, the opinions, and the tenses that are so key to speaking and writing. The second piece of the jigsaw here was quality assurance. And essentially the message that we got from exams analysis was mirrored here. So when we met as a faculty and we looked at our students' books, we noticed high engagement with receptive tasks. Our students were they were very confident about using complex vocabulary, but we often noticed that writing tasks weren't always completed. And again, we could see that in lesson drop-ins, that actually as a team, we maybe needed to allocate a bit more time to allow the students to think really carefully about how that was going to be put together and how they could make the most of the mark scheme. The third piece of the jigsaw was student voice. So again, they told us they really enjoyed learning languages, and they felt confident with the vocabulary, with the types of quizzing we were doing, with the homework every week, that we set them around vocabulary, but they weren't sure how to plan an extended piece of work confidently. And they weren't sure kind of how to do that on their own as well, without kind of the teacher really heavily guiding them through. So really what they told us was that they knew lots of vocab, but they wanted to know how to put it together and succeed. So this information also really resonated with some of the CPD that we've done as a team, because we've attended some CPD by Gianfranco, and he talked about having to explicitly practice the vocabulary within the context of a specific skill. So when we were thinking about our team improvement plan, it's something that all faculty areas do within our school and actually within our trust. We knew that putting productive tasks were really kind of, they had to be at the forefront of that team improvement plan to inform our next steps. So in terms of thinking around our team improvement plan, we actually referenced the Great Teaching Toolkit by Evidence-Based Education, because we felt it was a really reliable source of research, and it was a really useful tool in terms of making some best bets around the next steps for our students. So you can see that there's a summary on here. But in particular, we wanted to zoom in on these two aspects. So this toolkit talks about creating a supportive environment. There's lots of aspects to this, but we felt that this particular area around high expectations and encouraging learners to have a go would work really well for us, because we know in languages that students have to have a go and make a mistake in order to learn from it. So that was really, really important, that the students felt comfortable to be confident with the writing as they are with the vocabulary, and then kind of really reflect on that. So we thought that visualizers were a good tool for this. And I know Francesca's going to talk in a bit about how we've used error correction to really kind of maximize that. And we also knew that our students had to think really hard and essentially develop some self-efficacy. So again, we thought a visualizer would work really well here in terms of the teacher narrating the thinking first, clearly referencing the mark scheme and what exactly had to be included and what didn't need to be included. So we felt that point 6 from the Great Teaching Toolkit really was a good point to drive things forward. And taking those two aspects into account, we knew that obviously motivation was also going to be a key ingredient here. So we have a really good culture of giving merits and stickers for students who put in lots of effort, regardless of whatever kind of task it is that they are doing in the lesson. And that's been really well established, but we knew that we needed to take that one step further if we were to get the quality of work that we were looking for in the writing, in the speaking tasks. So we looked into intrinsic motivation. And essentially what we mean by this is that the students are driven to learn because they value it. It's something that takes a little bit longer than rewards and stickers. But I put this image on the board. It's actually taken from Peps McCrea, who does some snacks, some evidence snacks that are sent via email each week. And this was off one of them. And the best way that, and we like this because it's described a little bit like a ball rolling down a hill. Almost the better we get at something, the more we want to learn. So essentially we're creating momentum. And that's what we wanted from our students when they were doing a writing task. So with this in mind, I'm going to hand you over to Francesca now, who's going to just talk about some of the examples and how we've managed to put this theory and planning into action.
So yeah, as Vicky said, I'm going to sort of talk through some examples of how I've used visualizers and how I found success with using them in the classroom as a tool. So what I'm going to see if I can operate the slides. I don't know if I can here. No, it's not displaying. Vicky, would you be able to move the slides on for me? So on the next slide, here we go. You'll see visualizers as a tool. So this is kind of an overview of the main ways that I've found success. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom into each one of those ways and talk you through some examples and show you some examples of some student work. So on the next slide, it shows live modeling. This, as part of our CPD program, we looked at Tom Sherrington's walkthroughs, and this allowed us to look at live modelling in kind of really, really granular detail. And this has been particularly beneficial for scaffolding using metacognitive talk to narrate our thinking. And this you can see is an example of a year 10 class where I built students up to writing an answer to a 150-word task. They'd never tried this before. This was the first one they'd seen. So the first thing to do was to look at the mark scheme. I showed it under the visualizer. We annotated it together, and we were able to pick out those key success criteria that they needed to hit to do well. We then looked at a model answer and compared this to the mark scheme. So we were able to annotate and highlight and pick out areas of success that they could use in their own work. And then they wrote their own responses. And this is an example here on the right that a student wrote in class, and then I took it under the visualizer and I did some live marking. And I was able to showcase their work as an excellent example, but also mark it with reference to the mark scheme to show clear ways to improve. The next slide should show you error correction. So there's links to what we were talking about, but I really wanted to create a classroom culture where mistakes were normalized and actually celebrated. So I used booklets. Actually, we use booklets across Key Stage 3, and I found using a visualizer has been amazing with these. I'm able to do activities such as things like bad translation, you said that wrong, where I'm encouraging students to pick out my mistakes, well, sort of fake mistakes. And that means that they're spotting my errors, and I'm showing them that, you know, this is something where everyone's allowed to make a mistake, but we learn from it. And I'm getting them to spot my errors has increased their focus and their confidence. I've also built in the habit of live marking, and this again has increased student motivation because they see a purpose behind what they're producing. They're also encouraged to redraft work to score higher on a mark scheme, and this has been a habit that's really been built over time. They're growing to such a level of self-efficacy that they're actually correcting each other's work now without being asked to, as they've had the practice model to them so frequently. So you can see there that sort of big example is a student who wrote a piece of work, her friend next to her corrected some of her spellings, and then it was handed to me to mark properly. And it's built a really amazing culture, and this is a Year 9 group. So on the next slide, we've got a little bit more in depth of setting the standards. Showcasing our student work has had a massive impact on motivation. If students know what a good one looks like, they'll have more chance of producing it. This here is an example of work from a Year 9 boy. He finished his work. He asked for it to be marked under the visualizer. Normally there's a massive queue of people waiting to have their work marked. And he then used the feedback to redraft the whole thing to really improve, and because he wanted it to be perfect. And these sort of different steps and scaffolds have allowed students and empowered them to produce language independently through a gradual build-up of complexity. I've also been really keen on allocating proper time to this, so that students have this time for independent practice and they can really have a high focus on accuracy. And then they're able to see the results of this work. Praise is therefore much more targeted, and it's much more meaningful as it's tangible. And this then has led to increased intrinsic motivation. And this has been much more powerful as a team than just merits and stickers. And on the next slide, one of my main loves about a visualizer is the fact that it reduces workload. It's a massive time saver. It also, this culture that we've created, this intrinsic motivation, and these worked examples, it's reduced workload because classroom culture has really thrived. Students still do receive physical rewards. You can see my little praise chart there. But these stickers are for going above and beyond. It's their main motivation is actually to do the task and do it well, because the feedback they receive is purposeful and it's linked to specific learning. Live marking also means that because the feedback is live and direct, it reduces cognitive load for you and for the students. They can instantly respond with no wait time, but also less teacher time needs to be used to take home marking. Teaching therefore becomes way more responsive, and planning is massively reduced because resources are used live. You can also see my little setup with my standing desk and my visualizer. It's just a game changer. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk to you about some barriers that sort of, when I started doing this, made it more difficult. So at first, I had a terrible visualizer. It didn't autofocus. You couldn't even read what was being shown. And I actually had to sit down to use the visualizer. So I got a better quality visualizer, and I also got a standing desk. So this visualizer autofocuses, so you're not messing around with little buttons and things. And it's also, the standing desk means that I can see the entire room. I've got more classroom presence, and I never have to face the board. So my back is never turned to students. So I can always see what everyone's doing, scan for engagement, and it has massively increased that level of focus in the classroom. So kind of the impact of this overall is that students are more motivated to participate in productive tasks. They want to show off what they can do, and they want to do it well. They know that what they are producing is actually purposeful, and they will get immediate feedback. This classroom culture has meant that productive tasks have now become routine. Students actually know the success criteria, and therefore guided practice is able to move towards independent practice, just like it says in the bit of the walkthrough that I've picked out. This has created a cohort of confident writers who know the mark scheme and who are always striving for improvement.
So our final slide here is just some of the references, really. And like I say, these are our starting points in terms of, really determining why should we use a visualizer? Will it work for us? Will it be effective? And then, of course, how would we implement that effectively and really make it specific for our context and for our students standing in front of us? So, as you've heard today, we've been on a really big journey with it. We've had to stop along the way, reflect, change things as we go. But overall, we feel that they have just been a fantastic tool in terms of student engagement and really enabling them to see that success, regardless of you know, I suppose their end point with languages, and it really has just absolutely changed things in terms of student engagement and them really wanting to do well.
Thank you so much, ladies. I thought that was fantastic. Very good ideas. And I loved as well, like all the other presentations, how there is the scaffolding. How do you do that with the students little by little, which I think is really, really, really good. And how you embedded this approach as a whole department, because I think that really was probably, I don't know, but from my point of view, I think that is key to make it successful, because if one teacher does it but not everybody else, it's not going to have the same impact. I cannot see any questions there, okay, but lovely comments, okay, over there. I love the fact, yes, how to make students successful and experience success and be proud of their work. I think Sophie Mills was commenting on that, how I think that is so important, and actually celebrating what the students are doing. So I think that is really, really good. So thank you very much, ladies. And I am now going to, yes, it's up to Sophie now to introduce our last speaker.
Can't believe it. We're up our last speaker. I really can't believe this morning has flown over. And we've had almost 250 people join us watching over the course of this morning, which is just absolutely brilliant. And we really hope that you are taking away some really good nuggets of ideas ready for your lessons next week or for planning into September. Our last speaker is Natalia Korn. Natalia teaches in a secondary school. She teaches MFL, and she's going to be talking about strategies for engaging our lower ability learners. Really important thought. So take it away, Natalia.
Brilliant, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. What a brilliant event we've had this morning. So many brilliant things that we can take back into our classrooms and back into our schools. So as we've already said, from the final slot this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about unlocking the potential of our lower ability learners and strategies that we can use to engage them in the classroom. So just a little bit about me to start with. I've put my X handle there at the bottom. I'm currently teaching in a school in Cheshire, and I teach across French, German and Spanish. And the classes that I'm going to sort of be referring to today, I have 3 classes, 2 which are year 7 and 1 of which is year 9, and they are lower ability groups. So they are bottom set at Key Stage 3 in our school. Classes are setted, we're setted with English for MFL. And I also have a year 10 class, which is mixed ability, and there are students in there that will be looking at sort of grades 2 to 3 and students in there that will be 6s, 7s and above. So the strategies that I'm going to talk a little bit about today, it's really important that I know there are a lot of views on setting, whether it's the right thing to do or not, but whether you are teaching a mixed ability group or you've got a group that may be similar to mine where they are quite small class sizes. I have between 7 and 10 students in those Key Stage 3 classes that are those bottom groups. The strategies that I'm going to talk about are applicable across every class because in each class we have students that we have, you know, the middle line where the majority of students might be, and then you have those students that are above and below that line. So with those classes, there are challenges that we can face, and I've just listed them on here. So the first one, attendance. You know, we have students that may have reduced ability because they're not in school a lot of the time, and those two can often go hand in hand, might be for health issues or home situations that they don't attend school a lot of the time, they're missing from the lesson, and therefore they're not engaging with the content because they're not in the room. The second is behaviour. I think there can be more behavioural challenges that come with lower ability because of the next 3 that I'm going to talk about, the lack of confidence and engagement, but also a cultural and self-image element to that. I often think, how do my students feel when their peers are in a class of 32 students and they're in a class of 8 or 9? They know that their class is different. They know that they're in a group that aren't a high ability group. And therefore it's about having realistic expectations, but at the same time also providing challenge for those students that in that class of 8 students might be sitting in the top 1 or 2. So having the expectations that, you know, everything is still completed to a really high standard. Lack of confidence is a really big thing in MFL, particularly with speaking. We know how difficult it is for them to speak out loud, but also for those students that are identified as weaker learners, they might have low confidence across the board. It's not just in MFL where that's applicable. They may have the belief that it's better to not try than to try and fail, because that's the culture that they're used to, and they don't want to put themselves out there when they know that often failure is what they come up against. And as a result of that, they then shut down, they shy away, and that produces a lack of engagement. Some students will just tap out when the work becomes too challenging, or they don't put in the efforts. They can become quite apathetic. And it's really important that we try and capture them and we keep them in a really good place, because we often see them in year 7 when they arrive and they're bright-eyed and they're bushy-tailed and they're really wanting to engage with language learning because it's new and it's something that they might not have done at primary school, or if they have done a language, the language offered at secondary may be different. So it's a new experience for them. When they come to years 8 and 9, particularly if you're not teaching in an EBAC setting where the language learning is compulsory all the way through to GCSE, we can begin to lose those learners because they think, what's the point? I'm not going to take it for GCSE, so why do I need to learn it? I don't need to be in this lesson. Often things that we end up hearing. So it's about keeping them before we lose the engagement and before it becomes really challenging to try and claw that back. So having looked at those challenges, focusing on the positive element and how do we engage all students, but particularly those that are low prior attainers. And so the things that I want to look at today are relationships, retrieval, thinking time, positive praise, being explicit, and of course, having fun. So if we look to relationships, then I think relationships are really key. We know that if we don't build those effective relationships with our students, then students are less likely to engage and effective learning is less likely to take place. And behaviour can sometimes challenge our ability to maintain those relationships with our students. But if we are ensuring that our students feel valued, then they feel like they have a place in our classroom. And it might just be, you know, having that 30-second conversation with them at the beginning of the lesson that you know that they're interested in football, or they might have played on the school's football team in the previous night and you know that they've done that. And you say, oh, how was the match last night? You're engaging with that student on a different level that's not just about work. It's a more personal level. And it makes them feel seen and they're heard and they are valued. And I think they are the 3 most important things that we can make our students feel seen and heard and valued, so that they know that they're important and that they have a place. Fostering an environment where the students feel relaxed and they feel safe. So at our school, we meet and greet on the door. We greet them in the target language. I can't tell you what a delight it is to have year 9 boys walking through my door on a Tuesday morning and they're going, "Guten Morgen," as I say it to them and they're saying it back to me. I think if we build that relationship with them, they have a much more positive outlook on our lessons, and that then helps the engagement that they have in our lessons. But also recognizing that no matter what happens in the lesson, each lesson after that is a new lesson. It's a clean slate. It doesn't matter what has happened before, because it's a fresh start. Looking at a bit more of a pedagogical element, and looking at retrieval. So we've heard a lot about this already this morning. Some of this is just a reiteration of that. So each of my lessons starts with a retrieval task that will revisit prior knowledge from possibly the lesson before or a couple of lessons previously, but it's knowledge that will be needed in the lesson that's being taught. We know the benefits of retrieval. We know that it helps to promote more fluent recall. It helps to build those foundations that are really crucial for all learners to grasp, to be able to progress. And it's also important to incorporate some challenge into those and have some desirable difficulties. If we are making it really easy, again, that can lead to disengagement because students will fly through it and then they will sit there whilst you're doing the register or you're faffing about sorting out whatever's going on in the corridor outside. So if you consider for your lesson what is important to reactivate to get the most out of the lesson that you are teaching, but also think what is there in that as well that I can use to set as a baseline that's accessible for everyone to complete, and then build in some level of accessible challenge as well. So here's just a few examples. These are all from lessons that I've taught in this week that's just gone by. There's one in Spanish, one in French, and one in German. So the Spanish one is from a year 7 class, and so they had to match up between the English and the Spanish. So that provides them, they have got the answers in front of them, they're just having to match them to each one. And I print these out on a worksheet for those classes, and the worksheet that I have in front of them also mirrors what's on the board, because then what they're looking at up high on the board and what's below them on their desk is exactly the same. So that helps with their cognitive overload as well. In the French example, they were to translate the sentences into, put them into the past tense. And so for some like high flyers in that class, they would just be able to do that off the bat. But for some of them, they would need a reminder of je becomes j'ai, tu becomes tu as. So they would need that and a little reminder of like what happens to our verb, what happens to the ending. And then for the German, this is one that I did in my year 9 class. So we were looking at misconceptions and what might come up in the lesson, looking at those little words as well. So the first one, so they had to spot that the error was that it's not I don't like to play, it's I do like to play. But what was really interesting in that lesson was that the students were then actually able to tell me, well, if I wanted to say I don't like to play football, I'd have to say ich spiele nicht gern. And so they were able to tell me, actually, this is what I would need to do to modify the German sentence to make it fit the English, which I thought was a really good level of challenge that we added in as well, because they took the task and we took it one step further, which was really good. Looking at thinking time as well then. So we all know how it feels to be asked a question on the spot and think, I don't know what the answer is. And then 3 seconds feels like a lifetime and you just want the ground to swallow you up. And students, they feel that on a completely different level. It can be quite threatening for them, I think, when we ask them a question and they go into panic mode and they don't know what the answer is. If we are scaffolding for them and we take them through the process of I do, you do, we do, we've gone through all of that, we've given them loads of examples for them, and then we ask a question to the room. So to not pick somebody out by name, first of all, but to ask the question, leave a bit of time, and then ask one student in particular. So they don't know who it's going to be, but you've given every single student in that room time to think. When they then come to give the answer, they've had time to maybe glance down at what's in front of them because they've just done that exercise and they're giving out the answers to that. Or it might be something that came up in the retrieval starter that they can refer back to help them answer the question. So there's the expectation that they do need to have an answer, but it reduces the threat of you don't have to, it's not being given immediately. You have got time to look for that. And then that helps build their confidence and it puts them in a much better position to actually be able to give an answer rather than panicking, which will then sometimes lead to the disengagement because they think, I don't know how to do it, so I won't bother answering. Looking at positive praise as well. So our school is really big on positive praise, building students up, encouraging them, criticising an individual and pointing out behaviour that's not desirable highlights that the behaviour is not desirable, and it highlights that one particular student. Instead, if we're pointing out the behaviour that we want to see, that has such a powerful ability to shape the behaviour that we want to have in our classrooms. You know, we are quite in control of what the weather is like in our classrooms. If we want a stormy classroom where, you know, we're emphasising the things that we don't want to see, or if we are praising the whole class and setting that tone and dictating that atmosphere, and also that sets the environment that makes students feel more relaxed, more at ease, which in turn helps with the confidence. I think a lot of students as well who may be low ability go through the day being told, you've not done this, you've not done that, that's not how I wanted you to do this, that's not up to the standard that I expect. If they're going to 5 lessons a day and they're hearing the same thing all the time, if you think about the impact that that gradually has on them over time, by giving them just some positive praise and uplifting them, that really can make a difference to that student's day. And it only takes a few seconds out of our time to do that, but the benefits that it has in the long term are really worth it. Looking at being explicit as well is something that I've definitely found this year, and really working on giving explanations and how to break it down and make it so that it's really clear, really concise, and really accessible for all students in the room. Having an awareness of cognitive overload as well. So we know that for everyone, we get to the end of the day, and sometimes I'll get to the end of a Wednesday and my head is absolutely mashed and I can't take anything on, and someone will ask me a question and I'll be like, can you repeat the question, please? Because I don't actually know what you just said. I didn't take it in. If we think about our students and how much information they're given throughout a day, sometimes in just one lesson, it can be so much, it can be so overwhelming. If we're breaking everything down, making it really short, really concise, giving lots of examples, lots of time to practice, modeling everything, doing the I do, we do, you do, taking them through everything step by step and checking their understanding at each point. So you know that if you're going to come up against a misconception or something that they've not quite understood, that can then really help. Spending a little bit of time and maybe a little bit longer than you would with a higher ability class to do that and go through those steps has benefits in the long term, because you'll find that you don't have to go back and reteach a lot of things that if you have flown through it and they've not grasped it, you're going to have to spend time every lesson going back through it until they've eventually got it. And also with, like I said earlier about the worksheets that I will hand out, that they match what's on the board, making sure that there aren't unnecessary things that are on the PowerPoint that might confuse them, making sure that if they're doing a task, you're asking them to do it step by step, not overwhelming them. If you're asking them to do 2 skills at the same time, listening and reading, that can be quite a lot. Is there a way that it can be adapted so that they do a listening part first and a reading part second, rather than having to use 2 skills at one time? And finally, looking at having fun, and fun can encourage the participation of all the students in the room. And I've got an example that I'm going to give in just a second, but I've often found that balancing, what the students need to learn in that hour that you've got with them or over a scheme of lessons, and balancing that with their capabilities and what's realistic for them to take on in the time that you've got with them can be quite tricky. And there are lots of different styles of tasks. We've seen so many different styles of tasks this morning that are really wonderful ideas and that will be really useful to go back and implement. It adds that variety, because I think sometimes we can get used to, we've been given or we've found a way that works with a particular class, and it can be really easy to get stuck in doing the same thing all the time, because we know that it works, because it's comfortable, because it's easy to go to. But we need the variety just as much as the students do. And whilst I do agree that routine is really helpful and having the same things, varying it sometimes can just break it up a little bit. And with those that can be disengaged quite easily, games can help bring out some healthy competition. And for the lower ability learners, that can be really positive in that sometimes they're learning without actually realizing that they're learning. So this is just an example of a game that I did with my Year 7 German group. So I saw them on Monday and Tuesday this week. And at the end of the lesson on Monday, I told them that we would have a game if we managed to finish all the work that we needed to do. And so we had this at the end of the lesson, and we played 4 in a row. We didn't quite get to finish the game because it did take them quite a while to work out what some of the phrases needed to be. So they had the German, like you can see on the slide there, and they had to tell me what the English was. And I did give them like a 10-second countdown. So they had to work as a team, and there were 6 in the room at the time. So they had 3 on each team. And I also have a couple of learning support assistants with me for that. So there was 1 on each team, and it was quite funny looking at how competitive the learning assistant were as well as the students. And I think there was probably an equal level of competition going on there. But because we didn't quite finish, I said to them, don't worry, I'll save where we're up to. I'll take a picture of it and I'll put it onto the PowerPoint for tomorrow's lesson. And then when I saw some of them on the Tuesday, and I saw them in the corridor before our lesson after lunch, and 2 of the boys in the class were talking to each other, trying to remember what was on the slide and what had they translated and what did they need to translate to win the game, and what tactics could they put in place to block the other team. So I think having those elements of fun, like they were obviously looking forward to the lesson, probably because of the game and not so much the content that we were going to learn, but it all helps with engaging them and being able to keep them in that really good place so that they are more likely to want to engage with the things that we're taking them through. So finally, just to finish off, 3 key takeaways that I think are really important. We've heard the phrase less is more quite a lot this morning, so there it is again, but it is really true that less is more, and they don't need lots of different styles of activities. They don't need so much content that they're going to be completely overwhelmed by it. Giving short explanations, new content in really small chunks, it also, it all leads to a reduction in cognitive overload, which is far more beneficial for the entire hour or however long your lesson might be with them, if you're able to, retain them for that hour rather than losing them within the first 15, 20 minutes. Having high expectations, students are still expected to complete work to the same standard as others, no matter their ability. Same students, same standards. We should have the same standards across the board. If homework is an expectation, it's expected that it's completed. If you have presentation standards that are expected, it's expected that we keep to them. They're not treated any differently. And finally, building the confidence of and relationships with our students, because that little conversation that you can have with a student can go a really long way in terms of their day. It makes us feel positive that we've had that interaction, but it really helps them in terms of the big picture of their day at school and their life at school. If they've got a lesson on their timetable that they're looking forward to, they're more likely to come in with that positive outlook and the way that they're going to engage with that, and the benefits that has in the long term. So that's me, and I will hand back to the presenter team. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. That was great. It sounds like your school is very similar to mine in terms of your student body and the things that you put in place. So lots of what you said resonated a lot with me as well. Thank you very much for presenting for us today. That was brilliant. Right, back to Hannah.
Yeah, thank you very much. We've got one last presenter. I know Sophie just said Natalia was our last one. However, Ruth Bravo has had some technical issues this morning. She was due to present at 11 o'clock and hasn't been able to join the live stream until now. Ruth, I'm hoping this is going to work, so I'm going to add you to the live stream and fingers crossed it works. Ruth is joining us now, and she's an experienced native teacher and head of Spanish at her school, and also teaches A-level film and literature. She's going to be talking to us today about how to manage SMART targets effectively to reduce your workload, create a response culture, and maximize your impact in developing students' writing skills. So I'll just add your slides to the stream and that should work. So over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible because obviously we're all very hungry by now. And what I would like to talk to you about today is how to create a response culture, and particularly around improving writing skills and reducing the workload, which everybody welcomes, that kind of particular aspects. We do spend a lot of time marking, and we shouldn't really perceive marking as a waste of time because it isn't. But if it is, maybe we got to rethink, what is it that we are doing wrong? So I think the first thing that I hope you're not doing is correcting every error on the page. Particularly, I'm going to be discussing the approach to exam marking, as in full paper exam marking. And that is very taxing for us. It's very ineffective for the kids. It's very disappointing because what you get is a reading of what we can class as depressing data if we correct every error on the page. So another thing that is really frustrating, and we can feel that we're wasting our time, is setting targets that the students then ignore. Or setting the same target again and again and again, which is a waste of time and equally frustrating for us. So how can we mark more effectively? It's about working smarter, not working harder. One thing that I've been doing for years as a head of department is creating mark sheets. I'm sure you all do use mark sheets when it comes to exam revision, after exam feedback. And if you've got the assessment criteria, you highlight it. It doesn't take you much time. You don't have to do any writing. So that's effective marking, cutting your time. We have added a standard version of the translation for the writing paper, because it means that instead of us correcting the errors on the exam paper, we do ticks and crosses on the table, and then students have to be the ones making the effort and going from their answer to their mark sheet and actually compare. And that means that they got the correct version there. We keep all the mark sheets and assessments in an assessment folder in the classroom, so it doesn't walk about. We have that as evidence of progress as well. So if we've got like any kind of departmental monitoring review, that is very handy. We also use them for intervention and clinics. So the students come to us, the folder comes out, and we work on that folder. We work on a specific piece. Also, we only correct really, really big errors that we feel students cannot fix themselves. So this is what one looks like. It is a mark sheet that speeds marking. So on the left-hand side, you have the assessment criteria. I just circled the number. On the right-hand side, we have the grade boundaries at the top, because it helps the student track how far they are from the next level. It is quite motivational. The translation model answer is there, as you can see, with ticks and crosses. And we do have a section for positive feedback, and we have a section for targets that I will touch in further depth going forward. So what the students need is opportunities to act on errors, and they need opportunities to set targets, both receive targets that we set as the expert in the room and the professional person in the room, but also eventually we hope that they can set their own targets by reading our marking. So any errors highlighted, students have got to address themselves. Particularly, we are dealing with minor errors like accents or gender agreements or word order. Provide a bit of lesson time for that self-correction. That's going to develop their self-efficacy. We tend to use the same task or exam for clinics. So they rewrite different parts of it, different sections of it. It's not point you reinvent the wheel. We just keep working on the piece that you have to improve. And the errors need to kind of become your signpost to identify very specific smart targets. So a general target is add more past and add more time phrases. That is helpful to an extent, but if you make it really, really specific and measurable, then you would be more successful. So learn 5 irregular verbs in the prep to write and then add 3 to your writing is a little bit more specific, and learn 7 time phrases in future, but add 3 into your writing. It's going to be, it's just going to create that better context for them. One of the biggest barriers to academic progress is that even when students know what to improve, they don't necessarily know how to improve it. And in the words of Dylan William, it's like telling an unsuccessful comedian to be funnier, which is an accurate comment, but it's not particularly helpful advice. What the positive comments are is the fuel. That's going to be the motivation that's going to drive your student forward, because they've done all those really, really good things. And we shouldn't focus only on the errors. So I do force myself. I mean, there is an imbalance. Clearly, if you look, the fuel is not as big as the roadmap that the student has ahead to focus on and meet those targets. But it is good practice to remind them of those two things and have a bit of a balance. So I'm touching really lightly on Hattie and Timberley's model of feedback, and what we need to move away is us making all the effort. Because school has become a place where students come to watch teachers work, and that needs to be reversed. And what we have to do is provide the right challenge, provide the specific goal, but the student needs to increase the effort and employ more effective strategies to meet us halfway. So how do we do that in our school? So in my department, we have developed a response culture where we watch them work. So we give them SMART targets. I won't bore you with what SMART, I'm sure you're familiar with it, the specific, the measurable, the time related, and so on. We provide training on how they should respond in lesson time. We get the students when they're in year 9, which is a bit late in terms of training them for self-efficacy and response to feedback, but we have to hone these in. We provide very clear instructions as to where they can find explanation, examples, and tasks to practice whatever area it is, the grammar, spelling, vocab that they have to enhance. And this is following Rosenstein's principle of instruction, which has been mentioned before today. But we have developed a very, very good system where students are responsible and they have to centralize the targets and they have to log evidence of task completion towards meeting those targets. This is checked by staff, is monitored by staff, but is not marked by staff. It doesn't take up staff marking time, okay? And we share this system with tutors and parents. That increases the accountability on the students' behalf and it improves communication between home and school. So what we have created is a system of boosters, which are centralized resources. It's just basically Word documents where we include a little explanation of the grammar point and some links to activities or some activities that are going to help the student revisit the concept or develop the concept further. This could be activities that you've used in the lesson in your PowerPoint. You just collate them and you make them accessible. Microsoft Form, Google Forms, links to Quizlet tests. We sometimes use online tasks like languagesonline.org, or we use studyspanish.com, and we just insert the links. Sometimes the links don't work because the website suddenly becomes no longer free or it changes sites or something. So you do have to review them. On the right-hand side, we have the SMART target table. It is where the students centralize what they are going to achieve. We want them to be very specific. We want them to tell us how they're going to achieve it. And we want them to tell us either when they have achieved it or when they plan to achieve it. Then the column in the middle is where they log the evidence. I will show you examples in a minute. And the third column is to allow a little bit of reflection. So if they feel they need more help, they can leave a comment for us. Or if they need that, they feel that they've done enough and they've mastered the target, then they just leave a little quick message there. This is another booster students find really difficult, the difference between me and me. So the activity here is a link which they do and is self-marked. Another activity is Microsoft Forms, which again is multiple choice. So they have to just select whatever. And again, it is self-marked. And they have to write 5 sentences with me and 5 sentences with me in their exercise book. And that does take a little bit of marking from the teacher, but it's very, very, very minimal. So this is an example of evidence of progress. Number 1, the student had to complete a number of tasks on the conditional tense, and they completed 3 tasks. The tasks are quite a range of different complexity, so I feel that it's been fully met. And on the right-hand side, the student has to work on gender endings, and they had to provide evidence from their exercise book that they have written a paragraph and that it's accurate. This particular student was really struggling with the phrases. So he's gone off, done a little Quizlet, done a little gut feel activity. And I really like his reflection because it says Miles and I also tested each other on the vocabulary sheet. So it's really nice that they're using this as kind of a login of what they're doing, which is not just them on the computer or then on the book. They actually are involving and working with another students. So that is really, really empowering. This is what it looks like when nothing has been done. So the student has got deadlines, they've got targets, the targets are very specific. They have logged how they want to meet those targets, but they haven't given me any evidence. So this is something that when the parents question, why did my child score so poorly on the writing exam, I then refer them back to this and said, well, had he actually acted on the feedback given, we wouldn't be where we are. So it's actually really, really effective because the parents have got something to hold on to and the student has got something concrete that they can crack on with. It is not a perfect system, and I'm going to run you through the cons and the pros. So it does need a consistent approach. It needs the whole department to really buy into this. It does take some lesson time initially. The students do need the training. The tutors and the parents need to be explained the rationale behind it. And not every student wants to engage, because not every student wants to be become independent, and they don't want to necessarily become accountable. But we have persevered because it has really worked for us. It provides very specific and manageable targets for the students. It gives them opportunities for self-correction. We are focused on a limited list of targets that is just there and is logged and is tangible. It directs students to resources for extended practice. It's very, very helpful for very weak or very confident learners. So my very advanced learners, I can tell them, go and check out the present subjunctive booster, go and check out the if clauses booster, go and check out the imperfect subjunctives booster, and they can go and they can be learning in terms of their stage and not their age. It also really helps. It was really interesting to talk about absent students, because giving them access to this kind of document or booster, or whichever way you want to call the method, means that when a student has missed a lesson on a particular concept, they can go and access it at their own time. Very useful if you have a student that joins halfway through the year and you have to make time to kind of help him get to speed or help her get to speed with where you are. It sets high expectations, it promotes ownership and autonomy, as well as self-efficacy, and it does help bridge that gap between that triangle tutor, parent, teacher, with the student as the center figure of it. So we feel that it's been very, very powerful. It activates students as owners of their own learning, and it helps us watch them grow. And we can't really praise them when they go above and beyond and they really focus on their targets. I find that some of my students, we started doing this before lockdown. It helped them through lockdown. And I've had a student coming back from university and she says, Miss, I still use that smart target table for all of my subjects, because he helps me focus and he gives me that sense of direction. So I've got, in the resources that will be shared, I've got some food for thought, some quotes that have really driven my rationale behind what we do, and they've kind of validated that what we do is a good thing to do. And some recommended readings. I'm about to finish my chartered status program, so a lot of this stuff has come up from that. So there's some really good research out there that people can read and tap into, and I hope that you have found it really useful.
Thank you very much, Ruth. That's really useful and lots to think about there. We've got one question in the chat about teacher workload, in terms of, obviously, the whole purpose of what you've spoken about there is to reduce teacher workload. But in terms of creating the boosters,
it does take time. Yes, I've got to say, a lot of it we just tend to like copy and paste activities that we already do in the lesson, or we tend to copy and paste like grammar explanations. You could scan a textbook and just provide snippets. Basically, we tend to divvy up the different topics, the different tenses, or the different grammar points. We just divvy it up, and every week we try to add one to the list. A member of the staff just does it in their own time, or we improve them as we go along. If you've got a language assistant, that would be something that the language assistant can help you with. But if you've got websites that you know are reliable, like I find languagesonline.org, I know it's an old website, but it still has really good stuff.
Sorry to interrupt. So suppose, just because we're against time there, I suppose in terms of the time you spend creating the boosters then saves time further down the line as well, doesn't it? So
links to Quizlet, or MFL Magic, or whatever website works.
I'm really sorry, Ruth. I'm going to have to stop you there because we need to move on. I just don't want the stream to end. So I'm really sorry to interrupt you there. But thank you and apologies for the technical issues. I know you've been sat waiting since 11 o'clock to join and you weren't able to join. So I'm really sorry. Thank you very much. That was really helpful. I'm going to bring the rest of the team online now. Tom, sorry, I've already added you. Sophie there. Adam is there. I'm just going to bring everyone on because Esmeralda's had to leave because we were due to finish at 1 o'clock, and unfortunately she's had to leave us, so she's not able to be here for the end. But I just wanted to thank all of you for joining and giving up your morning to join live. Just a reminder that we will ask presenters if they are happy for us to share their resources as a PDF file on tests, and those will be uploaded shortly. Also, automatically ultimately at the end of this event, the recording will then be processed and uploaded, so you'll get that straight away. So using the same link, you'll be able to access that just once it's processed and everything. So you'll have access to that if you've signed up using the exact same link as you've accessed today. Tom, I'll hand over to you quickly before I close.
Yeah, just to say a number of thank yous. So the first one is to everybody for attending today. I hope you've enjoyed the event. Huge shout out to the team organising it. Obviously, Sophie, Hannah, Esmeralda, Adam. Obviously, Adam, just to let everyone know, is going to be stepping down from the team as of today, which we're all obviously very gutted about, because Adam has been sensational in terms of the work he's put in terms of developing this MFL community that we have via Teachers Talk Radio, and just being able to connect so many people together from the MFL community. So a huge thanks from me to Adam, just from a TTR perspective, but I'm sure everybody in the MFL community, even more so, is going to be really appreciative of everything Adam has done for the MFL community through these events. If you've ever attended one of our face-to-face events, you'll know that. I know that Adam will probably say a word in a minute, but if not, we've got an amazing team here. So leaving it in really a great position, but we're obviously all gutted, and keep in touch, Adam.
Like, just a huge thank you. Obviously, I think what people don't realize is no matter what goes in the background, and I always think of Hannah. Hannah's just been like an absolute crutch in terms of we work together so well, and just seeing you grow as a leader and those qualities, like from when I started with the team, has just been something really, really special to see. And having Esmeralda as well rally us on, it's just been a really, really fantastic group. And obviously, Sophie, you're going to be incredible. Like, really, really looking forward to having you on the team. Like, you'll support Hannah as well, but also having like that Microsoft Word paperclip Tom in the background just popping up out of nowhere. Have you got an issue? Yes, we have. It's just been a really, really nice little community, and I won't be far away. It's obviously it's personal reasons that I'm standing down, but it's also just amazing to give somebody else that capacity, that opportunity to stand up. And I'm sure, Sophie, you'll absolutely smash it. So all my very best, and just, yeah, I'll be in touch.
Thanks, Adam. We'll really miss you, and we're gutted that you're stepping down. But we wish you the best of luck in the future, and you'll be missed, but we hope you'll keep in touch. And perhaps we could have you back as a presenter one day, going all the way back to the beginning where we first met you as well. It would be great to have you there. Thank you, everyone, for all the comments. There's loads of comments coming through here, and I'm just trying to put as many on the screen as we can as we're going through. As you can see there, 300 viewers today live. That's live views as we've been going through the event, and I think that's outstanding on a Saturday morning at busy point in the term as well. So thank you to everyone. Obviously, if you've got any feedback, we're going to post that link to the feedback form on X. I keep wanting to say Twitter, sorry, on X, and we'll put that out. We'll email the presenters for permission to share their slides as a PDF. And we hope you've enjoyed this morning, and we hope you've taken lots away from that. And we hope to see you again soon. We'll be making an announcement in the next couple of weeks about our in-person events. I'm going to keep the suspense going for a little bit longer, so keep your eyes peeled on social media. That will be coming out very soon. But thank you very much for joining us. Have a good afternoon.